Hey everyone. This is Six Path Weeb, and welcome back to my YouTube anime fanfiction channel. Today, we're diving into the next chapter of our epic fanfiction journey. What if Naruko's final move changed everything? Part 2. Disclaimer, this channel is all about entertainment and discussion. I do not own any anime footage used in my videos, all rights and credits go to their respective creators and copyright holders. Now, without further ado, let's jump right in. Naruko had been traveling for just over 2 weeks. After leaving her home of the past 2 years, she decided it was time to reintegrate into human society. She felt a little anxious about it. Having spent the last 2 years living with a dragon, she had studied the culture of Fiore but hadn't exactly practiced it. Back in the elemental nations, formal etiquette had never been her strong suit. Case in point, she had regularly addressed the most respected leader in her village as old man without a second thought. A younger Naruko wouldn't have been too concerned about manners, but things had changed. One of the first lessons Tatsumaki had instilled in her was the importance of proper conduct. Although that might not have been obvious from her interactions with the dragon, she had taken the lessons to heart. However, one habit she had never shaken was her tendency to give nicknames to people she grew close to, and once that happened, all formalities tended to go out the window. Thinking about Tatsumaki brought a bittersweet smile to her face. His absence still weighed heavily on her. She understood why things had unfolded the way they did, but that didn't make it any easier. Even so, she knew she couldn't dwell on sorrow. Tatsumaki had always encouraged her to move forward and accomplish something meaningful. Sitting around in grief wouldn't honor his legacy, and she knew he wouldn't have wanted that. Another challenge she faced was figuring out what to do with the lacrima she had been entrusted with. She had considered incorporating its knowledge into her own archive magic, but that idea had quickly fallen apart when she first attempted to access it. Tatsumaki had been serious when he said he put everything he knew into the lacrima. It contained vast knowledge: math, physics, chemistry, biology, magic, language, history, cultures, space theory, dimensional travel. It even held information about the elemental nations. The sheer amount of knowledge was overwhelming. Archive magic wasn't simply an external storage system, it relied on the user's understanding. Information couldn't just be absorbed by glancing at it, it had to be studied and comprehended. That wasn't to say archive magic wasn't useful. Once something was stored within it, forgetting became nearly impossible. It could even link minds and transfer knowledge directly. Unfortunately, the lacrima didn't have that function. If someone wanted to learn its contents, they would have to do it the old-fashioned way, through study. For now, Naruko wasn't sure what to do with it. She would continue to review its contents when she could, but she wasn't a scholar like Tatsumaki. Besides, she felt that his knowledge should remain in Earthland. At the moment, however, her biggest frustration was the fact that she had been walking for 2 weeks without encountering any signs of civilization. Of course, she had come across plenty of wildlife, but no towns or villages. Based on her understanding, there should have been a settlement nearby. Tatsumaki had certainly chosen a secluded place to live. As she continued her journey through the forest, she noticed an eerie silence. Just minutes ago, birds had been chirping, but now the air was still. More importantly, she had the distinct feeling that she was being watched. After several minutes of this unsettling sensation, she decided to get to the bottom of it. One of the skills she had learned from Tatsumaki was the ability to manipulate the air around her, using it like a form of sonar. She wasn't as proficient as Tatsumaki, who could control the wind around an entire mountain, but her range was decent. What she sensed didn't surprise her. The area was devoid of life, except for one large, humanoid figure trailing her. The technique didn't provide specifics, but it was enough to confirm she wasn't imagining things. Now that she knew she was being followed, she was growing increasingly irritated. Whoever, or whatever, was behind her wasn't even attempting to be stealthy. After a few more minutes, she decided she had had enough. "All right, come on out. I know you're there," she called. She wasn't in the mood for games. She had lost someone important to her, she was exhausted, and she hadn't slept in a proper bed in weeks. At this point, she was in no mood for distractions. A moment later, a large figure dropped in front of her. "Hey, so you noticed me. You're sharper than most humans. Usually, they don't realize I'm here until it's too late." The creature was a towering, ape-like being, at least twice Naruko's size. It had green fur and purple skin, with a muscular build, pointed ears, and a long, sharp chin. A grin stretched across its face, making it look strangely pleased with itself. A Vulcan. From what Naruko knew, Vulcans were significantly stronger and faster than regular humans. While they possessed some level of intelligence, they could speak, After all, they weren't particularly bright. They tended to rely on brute strength, assuming that their size and power alone would guarantee victory. Most Vulcans used takeover magic, absorbing defeated foes to enhance their own abilities. However, something about this situation didn't make sense. Vulcans usually traveled in packs, yet this one seemed to be alone. "What do you want, Vulcan?" she asked, already suspecting the answer but hoping, just for once, that she was wrong. "I was just checking why someone was wandering through our territory," it replied. "Our?" That meant there were more nearby. But why were they claiming territory against humans? Vulcans usually only fought over land with other Vulcans, not people. "I'm just trying to find the nearest town, but I seem to have lost my way," she admitted. There was no point in lying. Maybe the Vulcan was simply scouting the area and had stumbled upon her by chance. If so, perhaps she could avoid a fight. Vulcans weren't always hostile toward humans, just most of the time. "Oh, you mean the town up north?" "Yeah, sorry, but no one's allowed in or out." "Boss's orders," the Vulcan said, surprisingly apologetic. Naruko's eyes narrowed. "Wait, you're blocking a town? Why?" This didn't sit well with her. Vulcans didn't usually organize like this. Occasionally, they might band together to raid a settlement, but laying siege to an entire town? That was unheard of. Doesn't really matter. We are, and no one's gonna stop us." The Vulcan sounded completely confident, as if someone had already tried and failed. "How long has this been going on?" she asked, growing more concerned by the second. "Over 2 months now. They'll be out of food soon." Boss is real smart, came up with the plan himself. The Vulcan looked far too pleased with this revelation. Naruko clenched her fists. Starving out an entire town? She had been in a bad mood before, but now she was truly angry. She didn't need to hear another word. This situation had to end, and she was going to be the one to stop it. First step, deal with the Vulcan in front of her. Without warning, she surged forward, catching the creature off guard. Iron Fist of the Wind Dragon. The attack landed squarely in the Vulcan's solar plexus, sending it tumbling backward in a chaotic spiral before crashing into a large tree, which splintered upon impact. That should wipe the overconfidence off its face. Naruko watched carefully, expecting the Vulcan to recover and retaliate in a fit of rage. However, after several minutes passed and it remained motionless, she grew cautious. Had she really incapacitated it with a single strike? Approaching the fallen creature, Naruko quickly assessed the situation. 2 critical details stood out. First, the Vulcan was bleeding from its mouth, an indicator of internal injuries. Second, it wasn't breathing. Surprise flickered across Naruko's face. She had assumed the Vulcan would be far more resilient. Still, she wouldn't lose sleep over it. The creature had admitted to holding an entire village hostage for over a month. Who knew what else it had done during that time? It was unlikely that all it had done was restrict movement in and out of the village. However, that didn't mean she had wanted this outcome. Naruko valued life deeply. This was an unfortunate and avoidable situation. She had allowed her emotions and frustration to take control, treating the Vulcan as an outlet for her anger. Had she been thinking clearly, she would have realized that striking a vital area with the same force she had used against powerful foes like Tatsumaki was unnecessary. Dragons were legendary creatures capable of enduring extreme damage, but Vulcans, while formidable compared to ordinary humans, were nowhere near as durable. There was nothing more to be gained by staying. With a quiet moment of respect, Naruko ensured the Vulcan was properly buried before continuing her journey toward the village to uncover the truth behind the blockade. The village's struggles. It was a challenging day for the mayor of the small village. Seated in his office, he once again found himself addressing the same grievances that had plagued the town for weeks, the relentless blockade imposed by the Vulcan raiders. For nearly 2 months, these creatures had prevented anyone from entering or leaving. The mayor had no idea what had provoked their aggression. One day, without warning, the Vulcans had begun attacking travelers at the village's borders. Initially, the villagers attempted to resist, but that had been a grave mistake. They were farmers and fishers, not warriors. They had lost 20 good men that day. Their next course of action had been to send a runner past the blockade to request aid from a nearby guild. That had been over a month ago. The nearest town was only a week's journey on foot. Clearly, the runner had been captured. After that failed attempt, no one else dared to take on the mission, and the mayor couldn't blame them. Given how isolated their village was, the likelihood of a wandering mage stumbling upon them and offering help was slim to none. Their only hope had been to endure until the mayor's son returned. The young man had left a year ago on a training journey. He had been a powerful mage before his departure, and by now, he was likely even stronger, strong enough to drive off these Vulcans with ease. The problem was, he was already a week overdue. And so, the mayor found himself in the same heated discussion with the other village leaders once more. "Your son still isn't here," one man pointed out with frustration. "He's probably wasting time at a tavern somewhere," another muttered. "Or worse," a third interjected. "You remember how reckless he was before he left." The comments continued to spiral into absurd speculation, as if they had forgotten they were speaking about the mayor's son in front of him. However, when someone suggested that the young man might never return, the mayor had had enough. "Enough," he declared firmly. "I understand that tensions are high, but we must remain patient. My son will return. Until then, we must endure." He wished he felt as confident as he sounded. It wasn't that he doubted his son's return, he feared it would be too late by the time he arrived. One of the villagers spoke up, voicing the concern weighing on everyone's minds. "Mayor, let's be honest. We would like to wait for your son, but the reality is, we're running out of food. If we don't act soon, we'll all starve." Murmurs of agreement spread through the room. Even the mayor had to acknowledge the truth of their predicament. But what could he do? He couldn't send the remaining villagers into battle, doing so would be sending them to their doom. Hello?" Every head turned toward the doorway, where an unfamiliar voice had spoken. Standing there was a young girl, appearing no older than 16. She had wild, spiky blonde hair and stood at a little over 5 feet tall. Her attire was a set of well-crafted robes that, while elegant, allowed for ease of movement. Most striking, however, were her ocean blue eyes and the 3 whisker-like marks on each of her cheeks. It was clear to everyone that she was an outsider. But how had she managed to bypass the blockade? The mayor, despite his confusion, maintained his composure. It was still his duty to address visitors. "Can I help you, young lady?" Naruko had actually been listening to the discussion for a while, quietly gathering information about the villagers' struggles. The situation was even worse than she had initially thought. These people needed help, desperately. "No, but I think I can help you," she responded with confidence. "I've been here long enough to understand what's going on." The skeptical expressions on the villagers' faces made it clear that they doubted her words, and the mayor voiced their concerns. "I'm sorry if I find that hard to believe. You're young, and we've already lost many strong men to those creatures. What makes you think you can succeed where they failed?" Naruko simply shrugged. "On my way here, a Vulcan attacked me. I defeated it without much trouble. I don't think a few more will be an issue." Her words carried an air of certainty. Was it confidence? Yes. But was she capable of backing up her claim? Without a doubt. The villagers exchanged uncertain glances. Some doubted that someone her age could take down one of the monsters terrorizing them. Others, however, considered the possibility, if she was a mage, perhaps she could be their answer. "You claim to have defeated a Vulcan?" the mayor asked. "How?" Naruko could see the skepticism in their eyes, and she didn't blame them. These people had suffered for weeks, watching loved ones fall to the Vulcan's attacks. Yet, beneath their doubt, she also saw something else, hope. "I'm a mage," she explained. "The Vulcan was bragging about what it had done to you all, so I used one of my spells. Trust me, it won't be bothering anyone again." A stunned silence filled the room. Had she truly eliminated a Vulcan in a single attack? If she was telling the truth, she could be the miracle they had been waiting for. The mayor was the first to recover. "Are you certain about this? Do you truly believe you can help us?" "I know I can," Naruko assured him. "And let's be honest, you don't exactly have many options left. I've seen the state of your village. You're barely hanging on." It was true. The people looked weak from hunger. The village was unkempt, and the river that provided their water supply was barely enough to sustain them. Worst of all, they had already begun to lose hope. It was the same look Naruko had seen before, the look of people ready to give up. She had witnessed it in Wave Country, before Gato was overthrown. She wouldn't allow another village to suffer the same fate, not when she had the power to stop it. The mayor hesitated. Could he truly send a young girl into danger on their behalf? "Why would you do this?" he finally asked. "We're strangers to you, and we can't offer much as a reward." "I've seen something like this before," Naruko replied. "I won't stand by and let it happen again. I don't care about a reward. Just give me a meal and a place to rest, and we'll call it even." After a long pause, the mayor nodded. "Very well. If you're that determined, then who are we to refuse your help?" A weary sigh escaped the exhausted mayor. Even outsiders were beginning to see his son as unreliable. Naruko, however, found the situation somewhat amusing. It was clear the mayor had concerns about his son's punctuality. Still, she chose to withhold judgment. Just because someone was late didn't mean they were incapable. After all, Kakashi was always late, but he never failed his comrades, well, except for that one unfortunate mission. Just point me toward their camp, and I'll have this situation resolved before sunset, Naruko declared confidently. The mayor raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the young warrior's certainty. It was as if failure wasn't even a possibility in her mind. Perhaps, against all odds, she really could help. Confident, aren't you? Well, there's nothing wrong with that, I suppose. Their camp is about a mile west of here. They positioned themselves close by to prevent anyone from escaping. Before you go, you should know, there are 10 Vulcans and an unknown leader. We assume it's another Vulcan, but we can't say for sure. So, 9 Vulcans and an unidentified adversary. Got it. Thanks for the intel. I'll be back soon. Oh, and my name's Naruko Uzumaki. With that, Naruko exited the office, leaving behind a crowd of villagers filled with both confusion and hope. What an unusual young woman, one villager murmured. Though she could have reached the enemy camp in under a minute, Naruko opted for a leisurely walk. Rushing in without a plan could lead to trouble, and besides, she wanted to make her presence known. If the enemy was aware of her approach, they would likely gather together, saving her the trouble of tracking down stragglers. Given their earlier encounter, she doubted they would underestimate her again. As she made her way out of the village, something caught her eye. A figure that didn't quite fit in with the rest of the townspeople. He was a tall man with a muscular build, his jet black hair tied in a bun at the back of his head. His armor was unusual, overlapping blue plates covering his upper back, shoulders, and arms, but leaving his torso exposed. He wore baggy brown pants that ended just past his knees, and simple black sandals completed his attire. The man walked in the opposite direction, his presence standing out even more due to his relatively clean appearance, unlike the dust-covered villagers. As they passed each other, their eyes met briefly. He gave Naruko a curious once-over before moving on. 2 things stood out about him. First, his eyes, sharp and intense, the unmistakable gaze of a seasoned fighter. Second, the overwhelming scent of alcohol. Who smelled like that in the middle of the day? Somewhere, a brown-haired woman suddenly sneezed, nearly spilling her drink. Though the man intrigued her, Naruko had more pressing matters. It wasn't long before she sensed she was being followed. Good. That saved her the trouble of tracking them down. Continuing west, she soon arrived at a clearing, the Vulcans' camp. Makeshift shelters were scattered across the area, with bones from local animals littering the ground. However, the most telling sign of their presence was the massive stone throne at the center. The real surprise, however, was what sat upon it. A large, muscular humanoid lizard covered in jagged spikes. A protective plate adorned its forehead, and a light-colored mane ran from the top of its skull down its back. Standing at least a head taller than Naruko, if not more, it was smaller than some of the lizardmen she had seen in Tatsumaki's scrolls. Still, that didn't mean she would underestimate it. But why was a lizardman leading a Vulcan camp? As far as Naruko knew, the 2 species rarely associated with one another. Lizardmen, though generally more intelligent than Vulcans, were also known for their short tempers. Normally, these creatures would be more likely to fight than work together. And yet, here was undeniable proof of their alliance. Before she could puzzle out the reason, the 9 remaining Vulcans surrounded her, and the lizardman rose from his throne. "You've got a lot of nerve showing up here after defeating one of our allies," it growled, its voice deep and gruff, barely understandable but brimming with restrained fury. The pieces were starting to fit. Vulcans weren't known for their strategic thinking, but a lizardman? They were fully capable of tactical planning. Though they often relied on brute strength, they could also be cunning when necessary. "He attacked me first," Naruko stated firmly. "Not that it seems to matter to any of you. I'll give you one chance, end this blockade peacefully, or I'll have to stop you myself." She doubted they would accept, but offering a peaceful resolution never hurt. Instead of laughing at her proposal, the lizardman's anger flared. "How dare you speak so carelessly? You know nothing of what has happened. You cannot understand the struggle we've endured, the sacrifices we've made. To simply abandon everything now would be disgraceful. This is not a ridiculous blockade, this is justice. This is revenge." Revenge? Justice? Was that what all of this was about? How misguided. There was no justice in revenge, only more suffering. It was a lesson Jiraiya had once imparted to her during training for the Chunin exams. At the time, she hadn't fully grasped its meaning. But after Sasuke's departure, it became painfully clear. He had abandoned everything in pursuit of power for revenge, and in doing so, had left behind friends who cared about him. This endless cycle of hatred only created more pain. "There is no justice in revenge," Naruko said, her voice steady. "Only more hatred. And you're not even targeting the person responsible. You're hurting innocent people. No matter what happened, you can't punish an entire village for the actions of one individual. All you're doing is fueling a cycle of hatred. I won't let that continue, I'll stop you here and now." The lizard man's patience was at its limit. "You speak as if you understand," it roared. "But you know nothing. What gave that mage the right to take my son's life? I will have my revenge. I did not go through all the effort of gathering these Vulcans just to be stopped by some unknown mage. Attack!" That was all the command the Vulcans needed. They lunged at Naruko from all directions. Yet, she didn't move. She simply waited, allowing them to close in. Then, as they reached striking distance, she spun in place, channeling her magic. Wind Dragon's Twister. A powerful vortex of wind erupted around her, sweeping the Vulcans off their feet. The battle had begun. This was one of Naruko's few defensive techniques, a fusion of Neiji's rotation technique and Tatsumaki's tornado. The rotational aspect made the technique stationary, but it significantly reduced the build-up time required for the original tornado technique. By the time Naruko fully activated the technique, it was already too late for the Vulcans. They were too close to escape the force of the miniature twister. The powerful winds pulled them into the swirling vortex, where they were buffeted by razor-sharp currents of air. As Naruko released the technique, the Vulcans were hurled in various directions. Many bore visible injuries from the wind blades inside the twister. Some only had minor cuts, while others had more severe wounds. Naruko noticed a few of them struggling due to deep gashes, but she remained focused. Her priority was the real threat, not these lesser foes. Taking a steady stance in preparation for her next opponent, Naruko locked eyes with the lizard man. "I told you, I'm going to stop you." The lizard man seethed with frustration. This young warrior had not only dismissed his motives but had also overwhelmed his entire group with a single move. If he wanted this done right, he would have to handle it personally. "Why do you care so much about what happens to some isolated village? What possible reason do you have for interfering?" Naruko's gaze remained unwavering. "I've seen what your blockade and attacks have done to these people. Innocent lives are suffering because of you. You call this justice? Well, stopping you is mine." Dash. It had been over a year since Bacchus had last been in the village, and its current state was shocking. The place looked like it had been under siege for months. At first, he found it amusing, but as he walked through the streets, the grim reality set in. The villagers were thin and covered in grime, their expressions weary and defeated. The only person who seemed remotely well off was a blonde individual he had passed on his way in. Something was definitely wrong. Determined to get answers, Bacchus headed straight for the mayor's office. When he arrived, he found the officials gathered in a tense meeting. "Hey, old man. What's going on here? I leave for a year, and the whole village falls apart." Bacchus wasn't known for his subtlety. The room fell silent as every villager turned toward him. Their reactions were mixed, some were surprised, some relieved, but most were visibly upset. No one looked angrier than the mayor himself. "Bacchus. Where have you been? You're a week late." His frustration was evident. The first thing his father did after seeing him was to yell? Well, at least some things never changed. "Oi, I didn't know I was on a deadline. Maybe try sending a message next time." While the mayor was glad to see his son safe, his frustration far outweighed any relief. Bacchus had no idea what they had been enduring for the past 2 months. Just as the mayor was about to lecture him further, Bacchus interrupted, his tone shifting to something more serious. "Pops, what happened here? Why is our village in this state?" The intensity in Bacchus's eyes made the mayor pause. Though rare, there were moments when Bacchus could be serious, and this was one of them. Sighing, the mayor gestured to an empty chair. "Sit down, Bacchus. There's a lot to explain." Bacchus complied, sensing the weight of the situation. As his father recounted the hardships the village had faced, his expression darkened with every word. The realization hit hard. While he had been away, his friends and family had been under attack. He clenched his fists. "Where are they? I'll make them pay for what they've done." The mayor had expected this reaction. He, too, wanted justice for their suffering, but he also worried about the consequences. They're about a mile west of here. Just so you know, we sent a wandering mage to deal with them not long ago. He left about an hour before you arrived. A wandering mage? Bacchus recalled passing a rather unremarkable individual earlier. The guy didn't seem particularly strong. You must have been desperate if you sent that kid to fight. Bacchus, we are on the brink of starvation. Of course, we were desperate. If you had been here, we wouldn't have had to rely on a stranger. If anything happens to that mage, it's on your conscience. TCH, fine. I'll make sure he's okay and be back before sunset. Though, if the mage was already in trouble, there wasn't much he could do. Hopefully, the guy could hold his own for a while. As Bacchus headed toward the door, he suddenly tossed a small package to his father. Stopped by your stuck-up friend's place in Harjan Town. Before he kicked me out, he told me to give this to you. The mayor examined the package. It was small but unexpectedly heavy. Opening it, he found a lacrima inside. Curious, he turned back to Bacchus to ask about it, only to find his son had already disappeared. Sighing, the mayor shook his head. I hate it when he does that. Naruko was well aware that a lizardman's scales were tough, but she hadn't expected them to be this impenetrable. She had attempted to get in close and use taijutsu, only to end up with cuts on her hands from the creature's armor-like hide. Is that all you've got, human? I thought you were here to deliver your so-called justice. Ha! If this is the best you can do, you might as well turn around and leave now. All this lizard man did was talk. Did he really believe this was the full extent of her power? He must have forgotten how she had already defeated his followers. It was time to step things up. Wind Dragon's Roar. A powerful gust of wind struck the lizard man directly, pushing him back several feet. However, the attack didn't seem to cause any significant harm. Not even a single scale appeared to be damaged. That didn't bother Naruko. She knew lizardmen lacked ranged abilities, which meant that as long as she kept her distance and continuously attacked, she could wear him down. With that in mind, Wind Dragon's Cyclonic Blades. The lizardman scoffed as the wind blades flew toward him. He didn't even attempt to block them, allowing them to strike his body. Aside from a few minor scratches, the attack did little to faze him. Ha! Your weak gusts of wind won't be enough to harm me. Let me show you what true strength is. I'm going to crush you. With that, the lizard man charged forward. Naruko had no intention of letting him get close and quickly backpedaled, maintaining her distance while continuing to launch wind blades in rapid succession. Despite each strike landing, the lizard man pressed forward without hesitation. Growing frustrated with the chase, he let out a furious roar. Is all you're going to do is run? I thought you were a warrior. Fight me. Naruko ignored his shouting. She was faster, and her strategy was working. While this particular attack was one of her weaker ones, it also required very little energy. She could keep this up all day if needed. The lizard man had already endured over 50 strikes, and his patience was wearing thin. The moment he got his hands on Naruko, he intended to put an end to this fight. Stop running and face me. That finally got a reaction out of her. Instead of continuing her long-range assault, she suddenly sprinted toward the edge of the clearing. Just before reaching the tree line, she leapt toward a large tree, shifting her body midair so that she landed sideways against its trunk. Then, with a powerful kickoff, she launched herself straight back at the lizard man. He hadn't expected the sudden change in tactics and failed to react in time. Iron Fist of the Wind Dragon. Her fist struck true, breaking through the once impenetrable scales. The sheer force of the blow drove her hand a full foot into the lizard man's chest. His eyes widened in shock. He had taken so many attacks without a scratch. How had this one gone through? Impossible. The light in his eyes faded as Naruko pulled her fist back. The lizard man staggered before collapsing onto the ground, unmoving. Naruko felt no regret. This creature had attacked innocent people under the guise of seeking justice but had instead spread fear and destruction. He hadn't distinguished between those responsible and those who were completely uninvolved, he had simply sought to harm humans. She wouldn't have been surprised if he had used his personal loss as an excuse for his actions. Regardless, the battle was over. Now, she just needed to deal with the remaining Vulcans and return to the village. Hey, that was impressive. Glad to see I didn't have to step in to help. Naruko turned toward the voice and saw a man standing nearby, the same one she had noticed when leaving the village. Step in to help? What was he talking about? Wait. Could he be the mayor's son who had arrived late? Thanks, she responded, eyeing him carefully. And you are? The name's Bacchus. My dad mentioned he sent a mage to handle this situation. Looks like you did well. Would have felt bad if you got hurt because I showed up late. What's your name? Naruko Uzumaki. Nice to meet you. Late? That was an understatement, he was a whole week late. Well, you don't have to worry about this anymore. The lizard man is down for good. I just need to handle the Vulcans I knocked out earlier, and your village will be safe again. Bacchus took a swig from the bottle he was carrying and let out a short laugh. No need. I already took care of them. When I arrived, they were either unconscious or too weak to fight back. It didn't take much effort to finish them off. Naruko frowned slightly. Wait. You got rid of all of them? They were no longer a threat. Was that really necessary? Bacchus's light-hearted demeanor disappeared instantly, replaced by a serious expression. After what they did? They were lucky I didn't do more. They attacked my village, killed my friends, and put my family in danger. They got what they deserved. Naruko didn't respond right away. She understood the pain of losing people. When the third Hokage had been killed, she had wanted nothing more than to defeat the one responsible. She could empathize with Bacchus's anger. Still, the idea of eliminating enemies who could no longer fight back left an uneasy feeling in her chest. Anyway, Bacchus continued, his tone lightening again, good work out here. My dad will be relieved to hear the village is safe. Let's head back. We don't have much left in storage, but I'll see if we can put together a celebration. The villagers need something to lift their spirits. That was something Naruko could definitely agree with. The people in the village had looked utterly defeated when she arrived. Knowing they were finally safe and having a reason to celebrate would help them regain their hope. But before heading back, there was something else she needed to clarify. You're the only mage from this village, right? Yeah, why? Bacchus raised an eyebrow. You want to fight or something? Naruko knew she had to word this carefully. This wasn't something to accuse someone of lightly. Did you ever encounter a lizard man while you were away from the village? Bacchus thought for a moment. Now that you mention it, yeah. Right after I left, a lizard man attacked me. I ended up knocking it off a cliff. I didn't even know there was a cliff there, I just hit it into a bush, and it fell. Why do you ask? Naruko's suspicion was confirmed. This wasn't going to be easy. The lizard man told me why he attacked your village. He said a mage from here took his son's life, and he wanted revenge. Bacchus stiffened. What did you just say? It's not your fault, Naruko assured him. You were just defending yourself. I just wanted to confirm whether his story was true or if he was making it up. No one blames you for protecting yourself. Bacchus remained silent for a moment, processing the information. Makes me wonder. If I had just knocked him out instead of sending him over that cliff, would all of this have been avoided? Naruko nodded thoughtfully. Something to think about. Let's head back, your dad will want to hear about this. With that, the two mages turned toward the village, ready to bring the good news home. Oi, Dad. We're back. The mayor looked up from his paperwork to see his son returning with the young girl they had sent out earlier. Bacchus appeared completely unscathed, but Naruko's clothes were torn and covered in dirt and dried blood. Despite her rough appearance, she didn't seem to be in any serious pain, though the blood dripping from her hands made it unclear whether it belonged to her or the creatures she had faced. So? Is it done? Were those creatures taken care of? The mayor's voice carried a mix of curiosity and anticipation. He was relieved to see both of them return with only minor injuries. Naruko flashed her signature grin. Yep. Took care of them all. I told you I would, and I never go back on my word. Bacchus let out a hearty laugh. Took care of them? More like wiped the floor with them. By the time I got there, all the Vulcans were already down. She was dealing with a lizard man, and I figured I'd let her have her fight. I've never seen anyone punch through a lizard man's scales like that before. You've got some serious magic power. Naruko shrugged. Well, I should be able to cut through a lizard man's scales, my magic was made to handle even dragons. Bacchus's infectious enthusiasm made it difficult to stay reserved. At first, Naruko hadn't been interested in talking much on the way back, but Bacchus didn't seem to mind. He kept the conversation going, and eventually, Naruko couldn't help but engage with him. He wasn't a bad guy, just a free spirit who enjoyed a good fight. The mayor's eyes widened at her statement. Bacchus, on the other hand, laughed even louder and took a sip from his ever-present bottle. Slaying dragons? That's a good one. That kind of magic has been lost for ages. The only way you could know it would be if you actually learned from a dragon. Naruko simply stared at him. Bacchus's laughter trailed off when he noticed her unwavering expression. Wait. You're serious? You were actually trained by a dragon? That's right. Tatsumaki, the wind dragon, was my mentor. He taught me everything I know about magic in this world. I owe him a great deal, something I can never fully repay. Naruko's voice grew softer, the weight of her words reflecting her deep respect for her teacher. The mayor misinterpreted her solemn tone. I heard that all the dragons disappeared in X777. I've never seen one myself, but if your story is true, I assume your dragon went into hiding that year? Naruko considered correcting him but hesitated. There was no reason to tell a stranger that her master had met a tragic fate at her own hands. That's right. All the dragons vanished on July 7th, X777. I imagine the other dragon slayers have similar stories to mine. It wasn't a lie, on that day, every dragon disappeared from the world. And while most dragon slayers probably hadn't lost their mentors the way she had, they had all experienced the same kind of abandonment. Bacchus grinned. The idea of fighting someone trained by a dragon clearly excited him. Hey, you don't even look tired after that battle. How about a friendly spar? I want to test myself against someone strong. Naruko raised an eyebrow. You think I'm strong just because I defeated some Vulcans and a lizard man? She wasn't opposed to a spar, but she wasn't sure how strong Bacchus actually was. If he turned out to be weaker than she expected, she didn't want to risk hurting him by accident. I'm no fool, I watched how you fought that lizard man. You didn't just charge in blindly. You chipped away at its scales with those precise wind blades until its defenses weakened, then you landed the finishing blow. A rookie wouldn't have thought to fight like that. You have skill, and you have power to back it up. Naruko was impressed. She hadn't expected Bacchus to pick up on her strategy so quickly. It wasn't exactly complicated, but he had still recognized the reasoning behind it. She had considered using a stronger technique right away, but after noticing that her initial attacks were wearing down the creature's scales, she decided to be patient and take the safer approach. Some might call it a cautious strategy, but that was the ninja way, win at all costs. Alright, I'm in. I'm curious to see what kind of magic you use. Hold on a moment, the mayor interjected. I understand that mages like to test themselves, but Naruko, you just got done fighting for this village. You should take at least a day to rest. I know I can't order you around, but I'd advise getting some sleep first. You look like you haven't had a decent night's rest in a while. Fight tomorrow. As for you, Bacchus, we need to have a serious discussion about your tardiness. Bacchus winced. He knew that tone all too well, it always led to a long lecture. Yeah, alright. We'll spar tomorrow. You good with that, Naruko? Naruko shrugged. Sounds fine to me. Maybe we could get a celebration going, this village could use something to lift their spirits. Bacchus immediately perked up. Now you're talking. Dad, we need to throw a party tonight. The village has been in a slump for too long. We should celebrate. And Naruko here will be the guest of honor. Naruko blinked. Wait, hold on, I didn't mean for. Too late. Bacchus had already riled up the villagers, and before Naruko could protest, the celebration was in full swing. The streets were filled with music, dancing, and laughter. People expressed their gratitude, showering Naruko with praise and small tokens of appreciation. She wasn't used to this kind of attention. Right now, Bacchus was trying to convince her to go talk to a young woman who had been particularly appreciative of Naruko's efforts. Come on, it's a sure thing. Just go say hi, Bacchus nudged her forward. Naruko hesitated. It wasn't that the girl wasn't pretty, far from it. She was of average height with long, sleek black hair that fell halfway down her back. Her complexion was smooth and fair, her green eyes were bright and full of warmth, and her smile was effortlessly charming. She wore a delicate pink kimono with floral patterns, accentuating her graceful appearance. The problem wasn't her looks. The problem was Naruko herself. She had no idea how to talk to girls in situations like this. Every attempt she had made with Sakura in the past had ended awkwardly. Trust me, this is a guaranteed win. Just go up to her and say what I told you, piece of cake. Bacchus gave her a push. Naruko barely had time to react before she found herself standing in front of the girl. Hey, Katsumi. Long time no see. You remember Naruko, right? You wouldn't believe how shy she is, she's been wanting to talk to you all night but couldn't work up the courage to approach a beauty like you. Bacchus grinned mischievously. Naruko froze. Did he seriously just do that? Katsumi giggled, clearly flattered. Is that so? There's no need to be shy, Naruko. I don't bite, unless you want me to. She winked playfully. Naruko turned red as a tomato. Even with her lack of experience, she could tell that Katsumi was flirting with her. Bacchus patted her on the back. Well, I think my dad's calling me, so I'll leave you two to chat. Have fun. He walked off, laughing to himself, leaving Naruko standing there, flustered beyond words. This night was going to be interesting. I may or may not have spent extra time with a client's daughter while I was assigned to protect her. 3, 2, 1. Bacchus, you reckless fool. Do you have any sense of discipline? Of all the impulsive decisions his son could have made, this had to be one of the most foolish. Not only did he overstep his professional boundaries, but he also involved a family friend in the process. Sometimes, the mayor wondered if his son would ever learn restraint. Bacchus winced, still recovering from the ringing in his ears caused by his father's outburst. He had expected this reaction. Yeah, I know it was a mistake, but there's no changing it now. I'm bringing this up because he sent this communication lacrima with me so you could contact him. He's probably going to ask if you know someone who can help with the situation. Honestly, I thought it was pointless since no one in the village is stronger than me, but now, there might be someone worth sending. He was clearly referring to Naruko. She was undoubtedly powerful and would be an asset in this situation. I'll reach out tomorrow and see if he still needs assistance. If so, I'll mention it to Naruko. She isn't part of any guild, so she doesn't have a permanent base of operations, and I imagine she could use the money. That's what I figured. I still can't wait to challenge her and see how strong she really is. Just thinking about it gives me chills. As the mayor was about to comment on his son's obsession with combat, Naruko entered the building. She was completely drenched, her expression a mix of disappointment and embarrassment. Yo, Naruko, what happened to you? Weren't you supposed to be with Katsumi right now? Yeah, that's not happening anymore. I doubt she'll even look at me after tonight. What? How did that happen? I set everything up perfectly for you. Did you say what I told you to? Bacchus was baffled by how Naruko had managed to mess things up. The situation had been arranged flawlessly. I really don't want to talk about it. I'm exhausted, and I've had enough humiliation for one night. I'm crashing in your room, Bacchus. Good night, Mayor-san. With that, Naruko headed upstairs, eager for some much-needed rest. Bacchus sighed, rubbing his temples. Great. Where am I supposed to sleep now? You get the couch. She's had a rough night and deserves the bed more than you do. It's late, I'm turning in as well. I suggest you do the same if you want that fight tomorrow. If I know Naruko, she'll want to head out first thing in the morning, especially if she's planning to assist the lobsters. The next morning, Naruko and Bacchus stood in an open field, ready to spar. Naruko had promised him a match, and she intended to follow through. She was actually looking forward to facing someone who wasn't trying to harm her, though she still planned on making Bacchus pay for abandoning her the night before. Bacchus, however, was thrilled for an entirely different reason. It had been a long time since he'd fought someone who could truly push him, and he had a strong feeling that Naruko was that person. Just imagining the battle made his adrenaline surge. How about some rules? Anything goes, as long as it's not lethal, Naruko proposed. After too many life or death battles, she wanted a fair match where she didn't have to fight at full capacity just to survive. Works for me. Now let's go wild. Without hesitation, Bacchus charged at Naruko with surprising speed. She barely had time to react, raising her arm just in time to block his palm strike. The force of the blow was intense, sending a shock through her body. Before she could recover, he followed up with 2 more rapid strikes, both of which she managed to deflect. Taking a quick step back, Naruko created some distance between them. Those attacks hurt way more than they should have. Bacchus was strong, but it didn't seem possible that his raw strength alone could hit that hard. Then, she noticed something: his stance. He positioned his arms behind him in a wing-like formation, a technique she had never seen before. That's an interesting fighting style. I've never encountered it before, she commented. You like it? It's called the cleaving hook palm. It's a rare martial art, so I'm not surprised you haven't heard of it. Allow me to give you a proper demonstration. Before she could fully analyze his stance, Bacchus launched himself forward again, this time even faster. Naruko was being pushed to her limits just trying to keep up. His speed was incredible, and she could barely manage to block his attacks. Every strike carried tremendous force, gradually wearing down her defenses. Then, in a decisive moment, a particularly powerful hit shattered her guard. A solid palm strike to her shoulder sent her flying across the field. Come on. I know you're stronger than this. Show me that Dragon Slayer magic, I want a real fight. Naruko coughed, pushing herself back up. That strike had been no joke. She hadn't been hit like that since her match with Neji in the Chunin exams. Wait. He had mentioned her magic? But hadn't they just been exchanging physical attacks? That's when it clicked. Bacchus had been using magic this entire time. His fighting style incorporated magic to enhance his physical abilities, which explained why his attacks had such an impact. I see now. So that's how your magic works. You caught me off guard, but now that I understand, things are about to change. With newfound determination, Naruko shifted her stance. If Bacchus was enhancing his body with magic, she could do the same. She channeled chakra to her limbs, increasing her speed, and combined it with her wind magic for an additional boost. In an instant, she closed the distance between them. Bacchus barely had time to react before Naruko's fist connected with his jaw, sending him skidding backward. "You're not the only one who can enhance their body with magic," she said with a smirk. Bacchus wiped a small trickle of blood from his lip, grinning. He hadn't taken a hit like that since his training days. This was exactly what he had been looking for. Naruko knew that engaging in close combat against him for too long would be a mistake. Now that he was prepared for her speed, he wouldn't let his guard down again. If she wanted to win, she needed to fight from a distance. That was just fine with her. Wind Dragon's Cyclonic Blades. She launched 5 razor-sharp wind blades at Bacchus. However, he effortlessly weaved between them, moving with impressive agility. He was making it look easy. Naruko narrowed her eyes. "All right then. Let's see you handle this." Wind Dragon's Roar. A powerful gust of compressed air shot forward, tearing through the field as it surged toward Bacchus. The real fight was just beginning. Just as Bacchus closed the distance, Naruko unleashed a powerful roar of wind, sending him hurtling across the field until he crashed into a tree. He struck the trunk with force before sliding down to the ground. That was frustrating. Naruko's combat style relied heavily on long-range attacks with her Dragon Slayer magic. She also had the speed to stay just out of Bacchus's reach, giving her ample opportunities to strike. Determined, Bacchus got back on his feet and charged at Naruko once more. She responded by sending a flurry of wind blades toward him, but he skillfully weaved through them just as he had before. As he closed in, he leapt onto a tree branch to evade another incoming roar. Using the momentum from his spin, he launched himself straight at Naruko. She quickly raised her guard, but Bacchus broke through her defenses with a precise axe kick. Taking advantage of the opening, he delivered 3 lightning-fast palm strikes to her torso before she managed to create some distance between them. Not willing to give her a chance to recover, Bacchus immediately pursued her, determined not to lose the advantage he had gained. Naruko noticed his persistence and continued to backpedal as he closed in. Seeing an opportunity, she suddenly pivoted and attempted to sweep his legs out from under him. Bacchus, however, anticipated the move and jumped to avoid it. But that was exactly what Naruko had planned. Once airborne, movement options were limited unless one possessed a specific type of magic, and palm-based techniques didn't offer that flexibility. Seizing the moment, she transitioned from her sweep into a powerful uppercut. Iron Fist of the Wind Dragon. Her attack bypassed Bacchus's defenses and sent him flying across the battlefield. He landed with a thud several yards away, momentarily stunned. Before he could react, Naruko was already on him, her hand poised just above his collarbone. "Hey, looks like I win, huh?" she said with a confident smile. Bacchus exhaled sharply before chuckling. If he had been a little less fatigued, maybe he could have kept up, but at this moment, there was no denying the outcome. "Yeah, you got me. That was one impressive fight, Naruko." Naruko extended a hand to her fellow mage, helping him to his feet. "That was a great sparring match. It's been a while since I've had a challenge like that." Bacchus grinned as he dusted himself off. "Same here. It's been years since someone actually bested me. You've got some serious skills, Uzumaki. How about a rematch sometime?" Naruko beamed at the offer. "Absolutely. Anytime. But for now, we should head back. Your father mentioned he needed to speak with me before I left." Naruko and Bacchus entered the mayor's office together, still showing signs of their intense battle. Despite their bruises and exhaustion, both wore smiles, their spirits high from the exhilarating match. The mayor gave them a disapproving glance. "I take it you two are done testing each other's strength? Honestly, I'll never understand the appeal of fighting." Bacchus dropped into a chair with a relaxed sigh. "Ah, you just don't get it, old man. There's nothing like pushing yourself to the limit against a worthy opponent. The adrenaline, the excitement, it's unmatched." The mayor sighed at his son's enthusiasm for combat. "So, who won?" Naruko chuckled, crossing her arms. "That would be me. Though it was a close fight, Bacchus is a strong opponent." "Figured as much. the mayor replied before shifting to a more serious tone. Now, about why I wanted to talk to you. Do you have any specific plans for where you're heading next? Naruko shook her head. Not really. I was just planning to travel and see where the road takes me. In that case, I have a suggestion, the mayor said. I have a friend in Harjin town who could use some help. If you're interested, I can send word that you're on your way. Naruko raised an eyebrow. What kind of help are we talking about? A bodyguard assignment, the mayor explained. He can provide more details, but I think you'd be a great fit for the job. Would you be willing to hear him out? Naruko considered the offer before nodding. Sure, why not? I don't have any set plans, so I might as well check it out. Let him know I'll be heading that way. Excellent. I'll inform him as soon as you leave. Naruko stretched and adjusted the strap on her bag. Well, if that's all, I'll go grab my stuff and get moving. This town's been great, and I'll definitely visit again sometime. She turned to Bacchus with a smirk. And don't think I've forgotten about that rematch. Bacchus laughed. Just don't take too long, I'm looking forward to evening the score. Naruko waved as she made her way out of the village, the wind carrying her steps forward. The mayor watched her go, shaking his head slightly. What an interesting young woman, he mused. Harjin town was estimated to be about a week's journey on foot, according to Bacchus. Naruko had been traveling east for quite some time, but she soon realized she had lost her way. However, that didn't trouble her too much. Her mind was preoccupied with recent events in Bacchus's village, replaying them over and over. When she had confronted the lizard man, she had been filled with righteous anger. The devastation it had caused, the harm it inflicted on innocent people, all for the sake of vengeance, it went against everything Naruko had been taught. Jiraiya had always emphasized the importance of understanding others and working toward peace, and those lessons had deeply influenced her. The thought of harming innocents in the name of revenge was something she simply could not accept. Yet, that was not the only thing weighing on her mind. What truly unsettled her was Bacchus's actions. Eliminating the defeated Vulcans had left her feeling conflicted. On one hand, harming those who could no longer fight back was clearly wrong. There was a significant difference between defeating an opponent in battle and ending their life afterward. On the other hand, Naruko understood Bacchus's pain. Those Vulcans had attacked his home, taken the lives of people he cared about. She couldn't help but wonder, if she ever had the chance to defeat Orochimaru when he was powerless, would she hesitate? She despised him for everything he had done, but wasn't that exactly what Jiraiya had spoken about? The idea of breaking the cycle of hatred through understanding and forgiveness? Pondering these heavy thoughts only made her head ache. She decided to set them aside for now. There were more immediate concerns, such as finding her way to Harjin town. The directions she had received were relatively straightforward, yet somehow, she had managed to lose her way again. This was the second time in a single week. All she had done was stray from the path to hunt for food. Once she had finished eating, she attempted to return to the road, only to find it missing, no matter how hard she searched. It was frustrating. She had never struggled with directions like this before. With no other choice, Naruko decided to continue eastward, hoping she would eventually stumble upon a road leading to Harjin. As she made her way through the forest, something unusual caught her attention. Several trees were missing their lower branches, while others had large chunks gouged out of their trunks. Even the ground bore signs of significant impact. It wasn't random destruction, nor did it seem like the aftermath of a battle. Rather, it appeared as though something had simply bulldozed its way forward, unwilling to be stopped by anything in its path. The deeper she ventured, the more widespread the destruction became. It escalated from broken branches to entire trees being uprooted and scattered about. It was evident that whatever had caused this was immensely powerful. As she followed the trail of destruction, Naruko began to question whether she even wanted to find out what was responsible for it. Whatever it was, it clearly wasn't something to take lightly. Fortunately, another option presented itself. While tracking the source of the devastation, she stumbled upon the road she had been searching for. Now, she had two choices: continue pursuing whatever had caused this destruction or head toward the nearest town and find proper directions to Harjin. That was an easy decision. She had no desire to involve herself with something so dangerous, especially when she already had a destination in mind. While she remained cautious about whatever had caused the destruction, her mood began to improve. She was looking forward to getting some proper food and a place to rest for the night. With luck, she would reach Harjin by the next day. Yes, things were finally starting to look up. It was going to be a good crack. The sharp sound of thunder echoed across the sky, and within moments, heavy rain poured down in a torrential downpour. Naruko let out a sigh. Could she not have just one good day? Was that really too much to ask? Luckily, a small town lay just ahead, connected to the very road she had found. It was slightly larger than Bacchus's village, but not by much. The town itself seemed peaceful, yet there was an undeniable tension in the air, as though the residents were anticipating something but were powerless to stop it. The atmosphere was unsettling. However, Naruko reminded herself that it wasn't her concern. She already had a job to get to, and she couldn't afford to stop and solve every issue she encountered. She was already behind schedule as it was. Still, she needed a meal, which was why she now found herself in the town's marketplace. Bacchus's father had kindly given her some money for food and lodging on her journey, and though it wasn't much, she had survived on less before. As she browsed the stalls, that same sense of unease persisted. It was starting to get to her. Finally, she spotted a vendor selling what she was looking for, an elderly man with a tired but kind smile. "Excuse me, sir. Do you have anything affordable? I'm running a little low on money at the moment," she asked politely. The old man seemed momentarily surprised, as though lost in thought before she had spoken. Composing himself, he replied, "Ah, yes, young lady. My prices are among the fairest in town, if I do say so myself." Naruko nodded, placing her order. As she observed the elderly vendor, she noticed that something was troubling him. In fact, it was likely the same thing bothering the entire town. Though she had a feeling she might regret asking, curiosity got the better of her. "Is something going on here? Everyone seems tense, like they're expecting something bad to happen." The old man let out a weary sigh. "You have sharp eyes, young lady. Well, no use hiding it. There have been rumors of a creature with incredible strength destroying anything in its path. No lives have been lost yet, but a great deal of property outside the village has been damaged. We're all just waiting for the day it reaches the town itself. We can't fight something that powerful, but for many of us, this place is home. Some would rather stand their ground than abandon the land their families have lived on for generations." So, a powerful creature was responsible for the forest destruction. That made sense. Naruko had to admit, whatever it was possessed an immense amount of natural strength. Uprooting trees like that was no small feat. "So, you're just going to wait for it to arrive?" Naruko asked, unable to hide her concern. "That doesn't seem like a good plan." The old man chuckled at her bluntness. "Oh no, we're not that foolish. We've hired a guild to deal with the problem. It took some time to gather the funds, but we eventually managed to commission an S-rank mission. We didn't want to take any chances, better to overestimate the threat than underestimate it." That made sense. If they had the resources, there was no harm in ensuring the job was done thoroughly. "You seem well informed. Are you part of the town's leadership?" Naruko asked curiously. The man laughed again. "Not quite. S-rank missions are expensive, far beyond what our village treasury could afford. Everyone in town pitched in to raise the funds. We had a large meeting to explain why it was necessary, and in the end, we all agreed it was worth it." That brought a small smile to Naruko's face. A community that looked out for one another, working together for the greater good, this was the kind of unity she had always wished for in Konoha. "So, which guild did you hire?" The old man closed his eyes in thought before responding. "Let's see. Lamia Scale? No, that's not it. Phantom Lord? No, not them either. Ah. Fairy Tale, that's the one." "Fairy Tale, huh?" Naruko recalled Tatsumaki mentioning some of the most well-known guilds in Fiore, and Fairy Tale had been growing in reputation. "Did you request a specific mage for the job?" "No, we simply required that the team include at least one S-rank mage. We're not very familiar with the magical world, so we wouldn't know who to request by name," the man admitted. That was understandable. Many small villages had little to no exposure to magic. After paying for her food, Naruko thanked the vendor for the information. He simply nodded with a kind smile. Now, she had a lot more to think about. A chance encounter. Mira-ne was going to be so upset. Lisana was incredibly late. She was supposed to meet her and Elf Niiken at the inn an hour after they had parted ways, except that it had been 3 hours ago. Lisana had wanted to find a special souvenir for Natsu since he had looked so disappointed when Elf Niiken told him he couldn't come along. Honestly, she didn't see why he couldn't have joined them. It wasn't like they absolutely needed him for the mission. Sure, it was an S-rank quest, but they had Mira-ne. With her strength, it shouldn't have been too difficult. For such a small town, there were surprisingly many stores to browse. Unfortunately, despite looking everywhere, Lisana couldn't find anything that Natsu would truly like. Although, knowing him, He would appreciate whatever she picked out, he was just that kind. No matter what, Natsu always found a way to make her smile. He could be a bit childish at times, and perhaps not the most logical thinker, but he was her best friend. As she rushed through the town streets, she was so focused on hurrying back that she didn't notice the person in front of her, until she collided headfirst into them, sending them tumbling into the mud. In the process, she lost her balance and landed right on top of them. Ow! What did I hit? She muttered, rubbing her head. Whatever, or rather, whoever, she had run into felt as solid as a brick wall. Excuse me, miss, but could you please get off of me? Came a slightly muffled voice. Lisanna looked down and realized, to her horror, that she was sitting on a young woman whose face was now pressed into the mud. Around them, a bag of groceries had spilled across the ground. Quickly, she scrambled to her feet and helped the stranger up. Oh no. I'm so sorry. I was running late and wasn't paying attention to where I was going. I didn't mean to knock you over, she apologized, her expression full of regret. The blonde woman simply raised an eyebrow at her. She had vibrant golden hair and striking blue eyes. Her clothes, though clearly well made, were now covered in mud. It's all right, no harm done, she said, brushing some of the dirt off her sleeves. Then her gaze shifted to the ruined groceries on the ground. She sighed slightly, clearly realizing that her dinner plans had just been spoiled. Lisanna followed her gaze and felt even worse. I feel awful about ruining your food. How about you join me and my siblings for dinner? I'm sure they won't mind having an extra guest. The blonde hesitated. Oh, that's really kind of you, but you don't have to go through the trouble. I'll figure something out after I find a place to stay for the night. Do you know of any inns around here? You don't have a place to stay? Lisanna asked, surprised. Why don't you stay with us? We have 2 rooms, and Elf Niikin doesn't need both beds. Naruko seemed reluctant. That's generous of you, but I wouldn't want to impose. Lisanna, however, was determined. She placed a firm hand on Naruko's shoulder. No way. I was the one who knocked you down and ruined your dinner. Let me make it up to you. It's really no trouble, and I bet Mira-ne would love to meet you. Naruko considered arguing but decided against it. There wasn't much point in refusing a free meal and a warm place to sleep. Besides, Lisanna seemed genuinely kind. How bad could her siblings be? Meanwhile, back at the inn, Mira-Jane was pacing the room, arms crossed. That's it. I'm going to find her, make sure she's okay, and then she's getting an earful, she declared. Elfman sighed. Calm down, Ne-chan. She's probably still shopping. You know how hard it is to find the perfect gift for Natsu. She could be out there for hours. Despite her frustration, Mira-Jane wasn't truly angry, she was worried. She had always taken on a protective role when it came to her siblings, ever since their parents had passed away. As the eldest, it was her responsibility to keep them safe. I don't care what she's doing. I told her to be back in an hour. What if something happened? We're on a mission, not a sightseeing trip. What if the beast attacked while she was gone? You know how strong it's supposed to be. Elfman knew his sister well enough to recognize the concern hidden beneath her stern tone. Lisanna is smart, Ne-chan. She wouldn't take on something that dangerous alone. Just have a little faith in her. Mira let out a deep sigh. Maybe she was overreacting. Still, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had been sitting in her gut since they left Magnolia. Just then, the door swung open. Mira-ne. Elf Niikin. I'm back. Sorry I'm late, I ran into a little problem on the way back, Lisanna called out cheerfully. Elfman chuckled. See? Told you there was nothing to worry about. Mira-Jane turned toward the entrance, preparing to scold her sister for worrying her, but she paused when she noticed the unfamiliar blonde standing behind her. The young woman was at least a head taller than Lisanna, with bright golden hair and striking blue eyes. Her clothes, which had a regal design, were now completely covered in mud. Mira frowned slightly. Lisanna. Who's your friend? Naruko observed the older girl carefully. She had long, flowing white hair and deep blue eyes. Her outfit was stylish but bold, clearly reflecting a confident personality. The same fairy insignia that Lisanna had was marked on her thigh, but in white instead of red. Lisanna hesitated. Oh. Well, she suddenly realized that she had never actually asked the blonde for her name. Naruko smirked slightly at her flustered expression but decided to spare her. My name is Naruko Uzumaki, she introduced herself. Mira-Jane studied her for a long moment before sighing. Fine. Do what you want. But just so you know, if you cause any trouble, I won't hesitate to put a stop to it. With that, she turned and headed toward the kitchen, leaving the room in an awkward silence. Lisanna sighed. Sorry about that. Mirai isn't usually that blunt with strangers. She's just in a bit of a mood today. Naruko shrugged. It's fine. I get it. Elfman, deciding to break the tension, stepped forward with a friendly grin and extended his hand. I'm Elfman. Welcome, Naruko. Naruko took his hand and shook it firmly. Nice to meet you. She wasn't sure what she had just walked into, but it seemed like her evening was going to be far from boring. I'm Lisanna, in case you haven't figured that out yet. Sorry for not introducing myself properly earlier, my mind has been elsewhere all day. Naruko looked at Lisanna and noticed the slightly sheepish expression on her face, along with a small blush dusting her cheeks. It was actually pretty endearing, if Naruko was being honest with herself. Why couldn't her sister be like this? It would make things so much easier than dealing with someone constantly in a bad mood. Don't worry about it, it's been a long day for me too. So, what's for dinner? Dinner was simple, just some beef stew and bread, but to Naruko, it was more than enough. The past few days had been rough, and food had been difficult to find in the forest. If she had to guess, it was probably because of whatever had caused so much destruction in the area. While the meal itself was satisfying, the atmosphere left much to be desired. Mirai had been completely silent since her earlier warning. Who knew she was the type to give the silent treatment? Naruko hadn't even done anything wrong. The tension was becoming unbearable. As much as Naruko enjoyed a peaceful meal, she could practically feel the weight of the unspoken words hanging in the air. Deciding to break the silence, she turned to Lisanna. So, what kept you out so late, Lisanna? Oh, I was looking for a gift for my fiancé. He's so hard to shop for, and it took way longer than I expected. I didn't even end up finding anything, she admitted with a frustrated sigh. Naruko barely registered Lisanna's frustration, her mind was stuck on one word. Fiancé? Wait, what? Wasn't Lisanna younger than her? How could she already be engaged? I'm sorry, but did you just say fiancé? Yep. Natsu and I have been together for as long as I can remember. I don't even recall when I first started calling him that, but when I did, he never corrected me, so I just kept doing it. He doesn't say it back, but I know he feels the same way. He's just not good at expressing his emotions. Naruko let out a small chuckle. Unless, of course, those emotions involve destroying something. Then he's more than capable of expressing himself. For the first time since dinner started, Mirai finally spoke, though her tone was sharp. Oh wow, she actually talks. I was beginning to think you lost your voice. Naruko wasn't usually one to start unnecessary arguments, but if Mirai wanted to act this way, two could play that game. Before she could respond, however, Elfman quickly stepped in. Nei-chan, please stop this. There's no reason to be so harsh toward Naruko-san. What's the issue? Mirai crossed her arms. What's my issue? We don't know anything about her. Lisanna, I love your kindness, but you can't just invite strangers to stay with us just because you feel sorry for them. For all we know, she could be dangerous. Mirai. You can't just say that about someone, especially when they're right here. That's not fair. Lisanna protested, clearly upset. Naruko shook her head, offering a calm smile. It's alright, Lisanna-chan. I understand where Mira-san is coming from. She's just looking out for her family, and I respect that. Thank you for the meal, Lisanna-chan, Elfman-san. I'll be on my way. Wait, Naruko. You don't have anywhere to go tonight. Please stay. Mirai doesn't mean it like that, Lisanna pleaded. Thank you for the offer, but I've already overstayed my welcome. I'll just camp in the forest. The rain stopped a while ago, so I'll be fine. Naruko gave a small nod of gratitude before heading toward the door. Wait. You can't stay in the slam. There's something out there. She finished softly. Lisanna, who had been staring at the door that Naruko had just walked through, turned to glare at her sister. I hope you're happy, Mirai. I just hope she'll be alright. Mirai frowned as she watched her younger sister retreat to their shared room. She hadn't intended to push Naruko away. The blonde had seemed like a decent person, but something in Mirai's instincts had told her to be cautious. There was an unsettling feeling lingering ever since they took on this mission, and now, after meeting Naruko, that unease had only grown stronger. She couldn't risk letting a complete stranger get too close to her family. Was that really necessary, Nei-chan? Elfman asked, crossing his arms. Even if she had a questionable past, we can take care of ourselves. Honestly, she didn't seem like a bad person. She was a little awkward, sure, but otherwise, she was polite. And let's not forget, there's danger lurking out there. The beast is still on the loose. Mira-Jane sighed, running a hand through her hair. You're right. She wasn't exactly threatening. I don't know. I had a bad feeling about her. My instincts were telling me to be careful, and I guess I overreacted. You should probably talk to Lisanna, Elfman suggested. She seemed to take a liking to Naruko. And honestly, I can't blame her. There was something about the way Naruko carried herself, strong, independent, like a true warrior. Mira-Jane rolled her eyes at her brother's dramatic assessment. Yeah, I should. She looked pretty upset with me. Do you think I should go find Naruko and bring her back? Elfman shook his head. No, I doubt she'd return even if you apologized. She seems like the independent type. And besides, if she's as capable as she appears, she'll be fine on her own for the night. Mira-Jane sighed in exasperation. Honestly, do you hear yourself sometimes? Elfman just smirked as Mira-Jane turned away and made her way to Lisanna's room. When she opened the door, she found her younger sister lying on her stomach, her face buried in a pillow. Seeing Lisanna so upset made Mira-Jane's heart sink. She hadn't meant to upset her this much. Hey, Lisanna. Can we talk? Lisanna's voice was muffled by the pillow, but the irritation in her tone was clear. What? Are you going to ask me to leave too? Mira-Jane sighed and sat beside her, gently rubbing her back. I know I overreacted earlier. I didn't mean to snap like that. I was just being overprotective. Something about Naruko made me uneasy, and I let my emotions get the best of me. Lisanna lifted her head slightly, her eyes narrowed. Was it how she insisted on washing her own clothes instead of letting me do it? Or maybe when she offered to help Elf Neek cook dinner? Oh. Or was it when she tried to help pay for the inn as a thank you for letting her stay? Because yes, that was just so suspicious. Mira-Jane winced. Lisanna had a point. Based on her actions, Naruko had shown nothing but kindness and gratitude. It wasn't fair to assume she had bad intentions without proof. The thought that she had unfairly judged someone left Mira-Jane feeling guilty. I know, I messed up, she admitted. I feel terrible about how I acted. But there's nothing I can do now. If we cross paths with Naruko again, I'll make sure to apologize properly. Lisanna pouted. Good. You should. You were really unfair to her. Mira-Jane chuckled softly. I promise, next time I'll be more considerate of the strangers you drag home. Then, with a teasing smile, she added, though I'm not sure how Natsu would feel about you inviting random people over, especially since Naruko is actually pretty cute. Lisanna's face turned red as she sat up, glaring at her sister. Mira-Nay. It's not like that at all, and you know it. Mira-Jane laughed at her sister's indignant reaction. I know. Relax. So, am I forgiven? Lisanna huffed before nodding. For now. But I won't fully forgive you until Naruko does. She deserves an apology. Mira-Jane smiled. Fair enough. Now, let's focus on the task at hand. We still have a job to do. Just as she said that, a loud bell echoed through the village, its urgent ringing sending a wave of tension through the air. Before they could react, Elfman burst into the room, his expression filled with worry. Mira-Nay. Lisanna-Nay. The beast is attacking the town. We have to go, now. Mira-Jane and Lisanna exchanged a determined look before nodding in unison. All right, let's move. The takeover siblings had successfully lured the beast away from the town, but rather than improving the situation, it only made things more complicated. Initially, the creature seemed indifferent to them. It simply moved forward, destroying anything in its path without actively attacking its surroundings. It was as if it had only one destination in mind, disregarding everything else. When Lisanna and Elfman attempted to engage it in battle to draw its attention, the beast merely swatted them aside and continued on its way. Realizing their efforts were ineffective, Mira-Jane took action, activating her Satan soul in an attempt to capture the creature's focus. At first, it ignored her as well, but the moment she unleashed her evil spark, the massive entity finally acknowledged her presence. With its attention fully locked onto her, she successfully led it toward the forest. However, this only escalated the threat. Now, instead of mindlessly destroying its surroundings, the beast was determined to eliminate Mira-Jane entirely. She clasped her hands together, concentrating her energy as her next attack reached its peak. Meanwhile, the beast steadily advanced toward her, unfazed by the growing intensity of her power. Evil explosion. A surge of darkness magic engulfed the clearing, obliterating the surrounding trees. Yet, when the smoke and energy faded, The beast stood firm, completely unaffected. The creature let out a deafening roar before charging at the stunned mage. "Ne-chan, move!" Her brother's urgent call snapped her out of her shock just in time for her to evade the incoming attack. How was this possible? That spell was one of her strongest, yet the monster shrugged it off as if it had been nothing more than a breeze. "Mira-ne, focus. We need to hit it with everything we've got." "I am. But nothing is working." Mira Jane's mind raced for an explanation. Could it be immune to darkness magic? Animal soul, half bird. Lisanna quickly devised a plan. "Mira-ne, hold it down, I have an idea." Spreading her newly formed wings, she soared into the sky, grabbing her brother with her talons and lifting him high into the air. Once they reached a great height, she shifted into a steep dive. "Mira-ne, now." Mira Jane responded instantly. Darkness stream. Beast arm, iron bull. Seeing Elfman descending toward it at high speed, the beast instinctively raised a colossal arm to strike him down. However, before it could act, a large black magic circle materialized beneath it, unleashing dark tendrils that coiled around its limbs, restraining its movements. "I am a man," Elfman roared as he delivered a devastating punch to the monster's head, a strike strong enough to shatter a steel wall. Yet, despite the force behind the blow, the beast remained unharmed. With a mighty roar, it tore through the magical restraints and, before Elfman could react, delivered a powerful backhand that sent him crashing across the battlefield. Elfman. Elf-Niikan. Seeing her brother thrown aside so effortlessly filled Mira Jane with fury. If her magic wasn't enough, then she would rely on sheer physical force. Charging forward, she unleashed a relentless barrage of punches to the monster's torso. Blow after blow, she struck with all her strength. She knew she was causing damage, each strike forced the creature back slightly, and she could feel its body tremble beneath her attacks. Yet, no matter how much she fought, the beast refused to fall. Growing weary of the onslaught, the monster raised both of its massive arms and brought them crashing down onto Mira Jane's back, sending her to the ground. Before she could recover, it delivered a brutal kick, sending her tumbling across the field. Animal soul, tigress. Mira-ne, hold on, I'm coming. With enhanced speed and agility from her transformation, Lisanna swiftly maneuvered around the beast's attacks. Reaching her injured sister, she immediately noticed the extent of her wounds, bruises covered her abdomen, and blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. "Come on, Mira-ne, wake up. We need you." She gently shook her sister, lightly tapping her face in an attempt to rouse her. After a tense moment, Mira Jane's eyes slowly fluttered open. "Ugh. Lisanna? What happened?" Then it all came rushing back, the battle, the monster's overwhelming strength, and the devastating blow that momentarily knocked her out. Forcing herself upright, she turned to her sister. "Lisanna, check on Elfman. I'll keep this thing distracted." But Lisanna refused to leave her side. "Mira-ne, you're hurt. Look at yourself. We should find Elf-Niikan and retreat. We can come back later with Natsu or Erza. We can't win this fight alone." Her voice wavered, tears brimming in her eyes. She knew they were outmatched. Elfman had been thrown across the battlefield, Myra's magic had proven ineffective, and she herself lacked the strength to make an impact. If they continued, they would lose. Suddenly, a booming voice cut through the tension. "Never underestimate a man." A massive tree hurtled through the air, colliding with the beast and momentarily halting its movements. Turning in surprise, Lisanna and Mira Jane saw Elfman standing tall at the edge of the clearing, his beast arm, bare arm fully activated. A thin cut ran just beneath his left eye, but aside from that, he looked ready to continue fighting. "Lisanna, I know you're scared, but we can do this. Look at Elfman, he hasn't given up. We're fairy tale mages. We don't back down. Now, let's take down this so-called king of monsters." Lisanna wiped her tears away, looking at her older siblings as they stood strong against their opponent. Mira was right. They were fairy tale mages, and giving up was never an option. "Elfman. Lisanna. Keep it busy, I have a plan." The younger siblings nodded. Lisanna sprinted toward Elfman, who braced himself, understanding what she was about to do. As she reached him, she leapt into the air, shifting forms mid-jump. Animal soul, penguin. Her new transformation revealed a surprising form. She had taken on the shape of a massive penguin, easily weighing around 300 pounds. With quick reflexes, Elfman caught her midair using his bare arm and launched her toward the creature with incredible force. The beast, still slightly disoriented from taking a direct hit from an entire tree, didn't notice the enormous aquatic bird hurtling toward it. Lisana struck the side of its head with tremendous impact, using the momentum to flip midair and smoothly shift back to her normal form. Without wasting a second, she activated her partial transformation, wings, readying herself for the next move. Meanwhile, Mira had been gathering energy for one of her most powerful attacks. This was her best chance, perhaps their only chance. She wasn't thinking about failure, her mind was focused solely on ensuring Lisana had enough time to move out of the way before she unleashed the attack. Just a little longer. And, now. Soul extinction. Mira poured every last bit of her magical power into the technique, holding nothing back. A wave of energy surged forward, consuming everything in its path and extending for miles beyond the beast. As the attack faded, Mira collapsed onto her knees, her transformation dissipating and leaving her in the clothes she had been wearing earlier that day. As the dust settled, the aftermath of Mira's attack became clear. The earth itself had been uprooted, leaving behind a deep trench that stretched for miles. But to the siblings' horror, the beast still stood, seemingly unfazed. Then, its gaze locked onto Mira, who was now exhausted and defenseless. It charged at her, showing no hesitation. Mira could see it coming but was powerless to react. Her magic was completely depleted, her muscles ached, and her body was covered in bruises. She raised her arms instinctively in an attempt to shield herself, bracing for impact. The beast's massive arm struck her with overwhelming force, and a sharp pain shot through her left arm. She gasped as the pain took over, realizing her bone had fractured. Instead of tossing her aside as it had done before, the creature remained over her, pressing down with its enormous, bird-like foot. Elfman's eyes widened in shock as he heard his sister cry out in pain. How had things turned out like this? Had they made a mistake coming here alone? Maybe he should have allowed Natsu to join them. Maybe if he hadn't been so confident in his own strength, things wouldn't have taken this turn. But as he watched his sister struggle, something ignited within him. No. This wasn't over. There was still something he could do. Mira's vision blurred as she felt herself slipping away. Was this how it would end? Crushed by a creature immune to her magic? There was some irony in that, but the unbearable pain made it difficult to think about anything else. She closed her eyes, prepared to accept whatever came next. Yet, despite the agony, the pressure suddenly lightened. It didn't disappear, but it was no longer worsening. Slowly, she opened her eyes, and what she saw left her stunned. Elfman had leapt onto the back of the beast. Elfman! What are you doing? Get down! It's too dangerous. Mira called out, frustration and fear evident in her voice. But no matter how hard she tried, her body refused to move. I won't let you hurt my sisters, Elfman roared. Full body takeover, beast soul. A brilliant light engulfed the area, forcing both Mira and Lisana to shield their eyes. When the light faded, only the beast remained. Neither Mira nor Lisana knew if the transformation had worked. Elfman? Are you in there? Mira asked cautiously. The beast turned toward her, its gaze unblinking. After what felt like an eternity, its eyes glowed a menacing red, and it let out a deafening roar. No. Elfman. Fight it. You have to stay in control. Mira pleaded. But the creature ignored her words, stepping forward with clear intent. Mira could do nothing to defend herself. Her arm was broken, and her magic was gone. Tears welled in her eyes, this was beyond frustrating. Then, Lisana stepped forward. Elf Niikan. What's wrong? She asked gently, her voice trembling but full of hope. It's me, Lisana, your little sister. Did you forget Mira, too? There's no way you'd ever forget about us, right? Because we both love you so much. Let's go home, okay? Mira watched in horror as her younger sister approached the beast with open arms, hoping to reach the brother she knew was still inside. But the moment Lisana stepped closer, the creature raised its massive arm, preparing to strike. Lisana. Meanwhile, Naruko had been making her way through the forest, still slightly annoyed about how Mira had kicked her out. She could understand the need to protect her family, but the way Mira had treated her felt unnecessary. It wasn't as if she had chosen to be there in the first place. Naruko sighed, pushing the thought aside. It didn't matter now. She probably wasn't going to see them again anyway. Maybe that was for the best. Something about being around Mira had made her uneasy. It was familiar in a way she didn't like. It almost reminded her of the Nine Tails chakra, just a little. That dark, ominous feeling from Mira's magic had unsettled her. She knew they were all mages, though she hadn't sensed any magic from Lisana or Elfman. Mira, on the other hand, had an overwhelming presence. Even though Naruko wasn't a sensory-type ninja or mage, she could still feel the immense power radiating from her. That alone said something. She had thought about setting up camp for the night, but the ground was still wet from the earlier rain. Besides, Harjan was only a day's run away. If she left now, she could get there by tomorrow night. Just as she was about to continue her journey, she felt that same energy from Mira again, only this time, it was far stronger. Was she using her magic at full power? Naruko was about to dismiss the thought when a terrifying roar echoed through the forest. Her expression darkened. Whatever Mira was fighting, it was powerful enough to challenge her at full strength. That wasn't a good sign. Another surge of magic flared in the distance, followed by another roar. Naruko hesitated. This wasn't her fight, it was a mission for their guild. But then, she recalled the destruction she had seen in the forest earlier. She looked around at the devastation. Trees ripped from the ground. Deep scars in the earth. That thing had incredible strength. There were only a few creatures she could think of that had that kind of power, and none of them were easy opponents. Another roar rang out, and that was the final push she needed. Naruko sprinted toward the battlefield, arriving within minutes. What she saw made her pause. Mira had completely transformed. Her new form resembled a mythical demon, her hair standing upright, and her outfit now a deep red leotard that exposed part of her stomach. Black, bat-like wings spread from her back, along with a thick, dark tail. Her flawless skin was now marked with eerie cracks. Lisanna was in a tiger-themed outfit that, while functional, looked more like something from a fantasy story. She was in better condition than Mira but still visibly exhausted. Elfman, however, was holding his own impressively. Naruko had arrived just in time to see him throw an entire tree at the monstrous opponent. One of his arms had transformed into a massive, dark-furred limb, pulsing with strength. Naruko's eyes narrowed. She had read about this type of magic before. Takeover magic. So, this was what they were capable of. But something felt wrong. And she was about to find out why. Naruko paused as she took in the sight of the creature they were facing. It was massive, at least 3 times the height of Elfman. Its upper body was a striking mix of green and red, with long, muscular arms. From each of its shoulders protruded a sharp yellow spike. Its enormous hands ended in 2 powerful claws, each looking strong enough to tear through solid rock with ease. Its head, in contrast to its imposing physique, was relatively small. 2 yellow horns jutted out from its forehead, giving it an even more fearsome appearance. However, the most unusual feature of this creature was its legs, large and bird-like, ending in sharp talons that looked built for gripping and tearing. Altogether, it was an intimidating sight. Yet, what unsettled Naruko the most was the nagging sense of familiarity. She had seen this being before, during one of Tatsumaki's lessons, though she couldn't immediately recall the details. It was frustrating. Why couldn't she remember something so important? Turning her attention back to the battle, Naruko had to admit that the Strauss siblings fought impressively as a team. Their coordination was seamless, and their last combination attack was particularly remarkable. Mira, in particular, displayed immense power, reducing everything in the vicinity to rubble with her previous attack. There was no doubt, when she made a statement, she had the strength to back it up. As the dust settled, Naruko's confusion deepened. How was that creature still standing? It didn't even appear injured. In fact, it almost seemed stronger. But that wasn't possible, was it? There was only one type of creature capable of absorbing darkness-based magic, and that was. Realization struck her like a lightning bolt. This was the beast. One of the rare dark ones from the ancient world. That was bad, very bad. Mira Jane had used dark magic against it. She was, unfortunately, the worst possible opponent for this monster. It thrived on darkness, feeding off both dark energy and the darkness within one's heart. Every time she attacked, it grew stronger. And considering that Mira was the most powerful among the 3 siblings, their chances of winning were dwindling rapidly. Naruko's fears were confirmed when the beast turned its attention to Mira, advancing with menacing intent. She tried to defend herself, but she had already exhausted her energy reserves. Now, she was vulnerable, struggling to fight back. Naruko knew she had to act immediately. If she didn't, Mira wouldn't stand a chance. Full body takeover, beast soul. Takeover magic? So that was the kind of magic they were using. It made sense, but what was Elfman thinking? Takeover magic required not only the strength to subdue a target's will but also an equal or greater level of magical power. Elfman might have had the determination, but after Mira had fed the beast so much dark energy, he was at a severe disadvantage. As Naruko observed, her concerns quickly became reality. Elfman lost control. And now Lisanna, why was she approaching the beast with open arms? Was she trying to reach her brother's heart? That was far too dangerous. Naruko didn't have a second to waste. Lisanna. She should have stepped in sooner, but she had wanted to see if the siblings could handle the battle themselves. Now, she regretted that decision. Channeling her wind magic, she propelled herself forward, intercepting Lisanna just in time. Grabbing hold of her, Naruko turned her body to shield Lisanna from the beast's attack. The force of the impact sent them both flying across the battlefield. Naruko crashed into a large rock, the impact creating deep cracks along its surface. Despite the pain, she lifted her head and looked down at the girl in her arms. "Are you all right, Lisanna-chan?" Lisanna's eyes widened in shock. "And Naruko-chan? What are you doing here? Why did you do that?" There were so many questions racing through her mind, but those were the ones that came out first. Naruko simply smiled. "I felt your sister's magic from a distance and came to check things out. When I saw you all battling this thing, I knew I had to step in. As for why..." She gave Lisanna a reassuring look. "We're friends, right? I'd do anything to protect my friends." He risked her life to save her just because they were friends? Lisanna would have done the same for anyone in Fairy Tail, but that was different. She had only just met Naruko today. She didn't know what to say. Finally, she managed a soft, "Thank you." "Don't worry about it," Naruko said. "Go check on your sister, she looks like she needs help. I'll handle this." Lisanna hesitated. "What do you mean handle it?" "I'm bringing your brother back." Without waiting for a response, Naruko launched herself into battle. She knew reasoning with Elfman wouldn't work now. If he couldn't even recognize his own sister, there was no chance that words would reach him. Ducking under a powerful swing from the beast, Naruko inhaled sharply before unleashing her next attack. Wind Dragon's Roar. The force of her attack lifted the beast a few feet into the air, but it didn't even stagger. Naruko had expected it to at least deal some noticeable damage. Narrowing her eyes, she leapt back, creating several shadow clones to keep the beast distracted while she prepared her next move. Despite its overwhelming size and strength, the beast had one significant weakness: it lacked agility. While it could charge forward quickly, its flexibility was limited. Small, nimble clones darting in and out of its reach made it difficult for the creature to land solid hits. The clones weren't strong enough to deal significant damage, but that wasn't their purpose. Their job was to buy Naruko time. Since leaving Tatsumaki's cave, Naruko had been experimenting with new techniques. One of them involved partially channeling her wind drive, coating her arms in wind magic to enhance her physical attacks and defense. The difficulty lay in maintaining the control necessary to keep the wind localized without activating her full drive form. It had been a challenge, but now was the perfect time to test it. With her magic flowing just right, Naruko charged in again. This time, she struck with much greater impact. The clones continued their assault, keeping the beast off balance. Seizing the opportunity, Naruko landed a powerful blow to its midsection, forcing it to its knees. She was about to follow up with another strike when the beast swung at her, sending her flying. Twisting midair, Naruko managed to land on her feet, skidding backward from the force of the hit. This creature had incredible strength, but she could hit even harder. It was time to step things up. On the sidelines, Mira watched in awe. The very person she had dismissed earlier had now come to her sister's rescue and was holding her own against the beast. And her magic, it was something Mira had only seen once before. But even then, that mage hadn't possessed nearly the same level of power or control as Naruko did. "Mira-ne. Are you okay?" Mira turned to see Lisanna looking at her with deep concern. A small smile touched her lips as she pulled her sister into a tight embrace. "Don't ever do something that reckless again. If Naruko hadn't been there, you. Lisanna hugged her back just as tightly. "I know, Mira-ne. I'm sorry, I just didn't know how else to save Elf Niikan. It was risky. But I'm glad you're safe." Mira's gaze returned to the battlefield. "I had no idea Naruko was this strong. I knew there was something different about her earlier, but I never imagined she was a mage." Lisanna nodded in agreement. "She's incredibly strong. And her magic. It's just like Natsu-kun's. She's a dragon slayer. I never thought I'd meet another one." Mira narrowed her eyes. "She's even stronger than Natsu. The way she controls her magic is amazing. She's using the wind around her arms to absorb the impact of the beast's attack so she can fight it directly." Naruko wasn't just holding her own, she was winning. And the battle was far from over. Lisanna wanted to defend Natsu, believing he wasn't weak, But she couldn't deny that his control over his magic was far from refined. He was powerful, no doubt, but his magic was unpredictable. On the other hand, Naruko's Dragon Slayer magic was both powerful and precise, a stark contrast to Natsu's untamed energy. Naruko was beginning to grow weary of the battle. She had wanted to test her new technique against a formidable opponent, but even she had her limits. While her speed allowed her to dominate in the exchange of blows against the beast, she was starting to feel the strain. Every punch she blocked sent a shockwave of force through her body, each strike carrying the weight of a sledgehammer. Even with the wind softening the impact, the repeated blows were taking their toll. She hadn't fully accounted for the energy drain that maintaining her half form would demand, and the exhaustion was creeping in. Taking a step back, Naruko allowed her newly developed technique to fade, catching her breath as she wiped a small trickle of blood from the corner of her mouth. She wasn't even sure when she had been injured, perhaps when she saved Lisanna or somewhere in the midst of the fight. Either way, it wasn't ideal. She had to be careful, using anything too strong or sharp could seriously harm Elfman, which she wanted to avoid at all costs. The sheer size of the beast also made it difficult to land solid blunt force attacks effectively. That was why she had attempted her new technique in the first place. She had hoped a well-placed, wind-enhanced strike would knock him out, but even after landing a clean hit, the beast had proven far too resilient to go down so easily. Deciding to shift her approach, Naruko quickly created several clones and sent them forward. Unfortunately, they barely made it within range before the beast effortlessly destroyed them. However, that brief moment of distraction was all Naruko needed. She swiftly maneuvered into the beast's blind spot, gathering wind energy in her palm. Rasengan. The spiraling sphere of wind-enhanced energy connected with the beast's jaw, launching it backward and sending it crashing into a nearby tree. That should do it, she thought. A direct hit like that would be hard to recover from. Cautiously, Naruko approached the wreckage of the fallen tree, preparing to retrieve Elfman's unconscious body. Just as she reached down, a powerful kick landed against her stomach, sending her stumbling backward. Her eyes widened in shock as the beast not only stood back up but grabbed the broken tree, wielding it like a massive club. Naruko-chan. I have to help her, let go, Mira-ne. Lisanna struggled against Mira-Jane's firm grip. Despite her own injuries, Mira-Jane refused to let go. I almost lost you once, I won't let it happen again. The worry in her voice softened Lisanna's resolve. But Mira-ne, Elf-Niikan needs us, and Naruko-chan does too. You're hurt, I'm the only one who can fight right now. Please, let me go. Mira-Jane knew her sister was right, but the thought of letting her go into danger was unbearable. Before she could respond, a sudden surge of wind energy erupted from where Naruko had landed. Wind drive. Though her voice was barely above a whisper, everyone could hear it. Naruko's expression had changed, she wasn't angry, but there was a newfound determination in her eyes. She was focused. It was time to finish this. With renewed energy, Naruko sprinted toward the beast. As it swung at her, she swiftly dodged and latched onto its arm, using the momentum to propel herself upward. With an agile flip, she landed both feet on its face, causing it to stagger backward. Taking advantage of the moment, she leapt onto its back. Iron Fist of the Wind Dragon. Her punches landed repeatedly, stunning the beast momentarily. It attempted to grab her, but its large arms couldn't quite reach. Naruko continued her relentless assault, striking the back of its head with a barrage of wind-enhanced punches until the massive form finally dropped to its knees. Summoning her energy, she formed a Rasengan, infusing it with the power of the wind. A fierce gust spiraled around the glowing sphere in her palm as she aimed for the final blow. Wind Dragon's Rasengan. The impact sent a powerful burst of wind through the area, kicking up a thick cloud of dust and obscuring everyone's vision. As the air cleared, Mira-Jane and Lisanna saw Naruko standing over a battered and unconscious Elfman, breathing heavily but victorious. Without hesitation, both sisters ran toward them. Mira-Jane immediately checked on Elfman, while Lisanna hurried to Naruko's side. As she reached her, Naruko swayed unsteadily before collapsing into Lisanna's arms. Hey, told you I'd bring your brother back. I never go back on my word. Believe it. That was the last thing she managed to say before drifting into unconsciousness. Lisanna looked down at the mysterious blonde who had entered her life and smiled softly. I guess you don't, do you? Thank you, Naruko-chan. Thank you so much. Naruko stirred slightly, a soft sigh escaping her lips. She was incredibly comfortable, more so than she had been in a long time. The warmth surrounding her made it difficult to even consider getting up. Wait, bed? Why was she in a bed? The last thing she remembered was facing a possessed elfman before everything went black. Her eyes snapped open as she sat up abruptly, scanning the room in confusion. But as she took in her surroundings, she relaxed. She was back at the inn with the takeover siblings. They must have brought her here after she lost consciousness. A quiet murmur caught her attention, and she turned her head to see Lisanna asleep in a chair beside her bed. The younger girl had a few bandages on her face and arms but otherwise looked fine. From what Naruko had seen in the battle, Lisanna primarily played a support role, while her older siblings took on the more physically demanding fights. That didn't mean she wasn't important. Many underestimated support magic, dismissing it as less powerful than offensive abilities, but Naruko knew better. Support was essential, whether for mages, warriors, or even ninja. Without it, even the strongest fighters could fall. The dragons had recognized this, which was why sky dragons were either highly protected or targeted during conflicts. Underestimating support could cost someone a battle. Shikamaru had always considered himself a support-type fighter. He might have been the most laid-back person Naruko knew, but his intelligence and strategies made him one of the most formidable allies anyone could have. Anyone who failed to recognize that usually lost before they even realized what had happened. Stretching slightly, Naruko felt a sharp protest from her sore muscles. It seemed the battle had taken more of a toll on her body than she initially thought. Glancing down at herself, she noticed that her entire torso was wrapped in bandages. She must have looked pretty rough the night before. A small smile appeared on her face as she turned her gaze back to Lisanna. It was obvious she was the one who had taken care of her injuries. Mira Jane had been too wounded to help, and Elfman had likely been in no condition to do much after the intense fight. Why did Lisanna care so much? Maybe she was just naturally kind, but it still felt strange to Naruko. Growing up, she hadn't experienced much affection. She could count on one hand the people who had genuinely looked out for her. The fact that someone around her age, not just anyone, but a kind-hearted girl, was showing her such concern was unfamiliar but nice. Lisanna stirred slightly, and Naruko quickly looked away, not wanting to be caught staring. "Good morning, Lisanna-chan," she greeted softly. Rubbing the sleep from her eyes, Lisanna turned to Naruko. She noticed the faint redness in the blonde's cheeks and wondered if she was coming down with a fever. "Good morning, Naruko-kun. How are you feeling?" Naruko met her gaze and saw the concern in her eyes. Her expression softened as she smiled warmly. "I'm fine. Thank you for taking care of me, it really means a lot." Now it was Lisanna's turn to blush slightly. "It was nothing, really. After everything you did last night, it was the least I could do. Thank you, by the way. For everything." Naruko leaned back on the bed, resting her hands behind her head. "You don't need to thank me. I didn't do that much anyway. I just wish I had gotten there earlier, so your sister wouldn't have been injured." Lisanna frowned, clearly disagreeing. "What do you mean you didn't do anything? You saved my life. You helped bring my brother back. You protected us all and got seriously hurt in the process, and you say it wasn't much?" Naruko simply shrugged. "You all were already fighting and protecting the town before I even arrived. I'm just relieved I made it in time before things got worse. I don't even want to think about what could have happened if I had been too late." Lisanna smiled softly, a hint of sadness in her expression. Naruko didn't seem to care about the battle itself or even how injured she was, her only concern was their safety. Sitting up, Naruko glanced around. She had noticed earlier that she wasn't wearing her usual clothes. Instead, she was dressed in oversized pajamas, probably Elfman's. "Hey, Lisanna-chan, do you know WH?" She was suddenly cut off as Lisanna leaned forward and wrapped her in a firm hug. Naruko froze, her mind momentarily going blank as she tried to process what was happening. "You really are different, Naruko-kun," Lisanna murmured. "You're strong, but you're also kind. You don't care about recognition or rewards, you just do what you believe is right, no matter the cost. I'm really glad I met you." Slowly, Naruko returned the hug, her thoughts swirling. Had she really made such a strong impact on Lisanna? "You make it sound like I'm something special," she said after a moment. "I'm not perfect, Lisanna-chan. When I was younger, I craved attention and thought too highly of my own skills. But then I met someone who changed my perspective. He once told me, those who are strong often become arrogant and isolated. I've seen how true that can be, and I promised myself I wouldn't fall into that trap. It's not that I don't care about recognition, I just think there are more important things in life. No one is perfect, and that's okay." Lisanna remained in Naruko's arms, letting her words sink in. Something about being close to Naruko made her feel safe, protected. It was a feeling she usually associated with Natsu, but this was different. It felt Right. Naruko, on the other hand, was still trying to figure out how to react. No one had ever hugged her like this before. The closest she had come to something like this was when Sakura had asked her out on that so-called date, though even back then, she had known it wasn't real. This was entirely new territory for her. Not that she was complaining. Ahem. A quiet cough broke the moment, making Lisanna jump back in surprise. Both girls turned to see Mira Jane standing in the doorway, her arms crossed and an amused smirk on her face. "How long have you been standing there?" Lisanna asked, her face burning with embarrassment. Mira Jane, who was bandaged but not as heavily injured as Naruko, raised an eyebrow. "Long enough," she replied playfully. Her smirk widened as she added, "You know, Lisanna, I believed you earlier when you said there was nothing going on, but I'm not so sure anymore. It's starting to look a little suspicious." Lisanna's face turned an even deeper shade of red. Her mind scrambled for a response, but in her flustered state, she resorted to the only thing she could think of, yelling. "Mira, nay." After breakfast, the takeover siblings and Naruko headed toward the train station to travel to Harjin. Naruko had initially wanted to run there instead, but the others, especially Mira and Lisanna, insisted that she travel with them. Elfman, on the other hand, had been unusually quiet all morning. At first, Naruko resisted, but she eventually gave in. The reason for her reluctance was simple: her previous experience with trains in the elemental nations had been far from pleasant. The only time she had ever been on one was in Snow Country, and it had not left a good impression. Even now, she remained skeptical about boarding what she considered a loud, metal contraption speeding toward disaster. "Come on, Naruko, just get on the train. Stop being so dramatic," Mira urged, exasperated. She couldn't believe how hesitant Naruko was being. After everything she had done the night before, Mira didn't expect her to be afraid of something as ordinary as riding a train. It was almost as if she had been nearly run over by one before. Naruko gave her an unimpressed look. Mira had no idea what she had been through with trains, and Naruko had no intention of explaining. If Mira wanted to board that thing, she was welcome too, but Naruko felt much safer relying on her own 2 feet. Lisanna, however, had a different approach. She walked over, gently took Naruko's hand, and started pulling her toward the train. "Come on, Naruko-chan, it'll be fine. I already bought your ticket, so let's go. I don't want to wait for the evening train." Lisanna was genuinely curious about Naruko's reluctance. Could it be a Dragon Slayer thing? For some reason, Naruko let herself be led onto the train. She wasn't sure why she didn't pull away, but something about Lisanna's kindness made it difficult to refuse. Mira observed their interaction with a small frown. Lisanna had always been a caring person, but she only acted like this around Natsu. Despite what her sister might say, Mira could sense something going on between them, and she was determined to figure out exactly what it was. They found a booth in the back of the train, with Lisanna sitting beside Naruko while Mira and Elfman sat across from them. Even though Naruko was still uneasy about being on the train, she reasoned that if things went wrong, she could always jump out the window. As the train started moving, a calm silence settled over the group. Elfman had barely spoken all morning, his mind preoccupied with trying to recall the events of the previous night. All he remembered was attempting to take over the beast, then waking up in bed covered in bandages, with Mira Jane sleeping beside him. When he saw Naruko also heavily bandaged, he realized that he must have lost control. There was no reason for Naruko to have been involved unless things had escalated. That meant she was the one who had stopped him. But how? "Naruko-san, I know I don't have much right to ask this, but I need to know, how did you stop me last night?" Naruko, distracted by an unsettling feeling in her stomach, barely registered the question. She hadn't eaten anything strange that morning, so why did she feel so nauseous? "Mira didn't tell you?" she asked, glancing at the older sister. Elfman shook his head. "No, I've been trying to remember on my own, but I can't recall anything after I attempted the takeover. I'd like to hear it from you." Naruko looked at Mira, who seemed very focused on avoiding eye contact. Why hadn't she said anything? Not that it really mattered, but it was still odd. "Well," Naruko finally said, "I came across you all while you were fighting and saw you trying to protect your sister. When I realized you had lost control, I stepped in to stop you before things got worse. After that, it wasn't much, I just fought you until you lost consciousness and reverted back." Elfman frowned. That much was already obvious based on their injuries. "I kind of figured that much. I was hoping for something more specific. What kind of magic did you use?" "I primarily use wind magic. It was a bit tricky since I didn't want to hurt you, but it worked out in the end." Naruko didn't see the point in going into more detail. There were aspects of that night she felt Elfman was better off not remembering. Wind magic? That was unexpected, but not unheard of. The real question was, just how strong was Naruko? If she had been holding back and still managed to stop the beast when the three of them couldn't, then she was on an entirely different level. Lisanna gave Naruko a curious look. Why was she being so vague? Was there a reason she wasn't telling Elfman everything, or was she always this secretive? Naruko-chan, Lisanna spoke up, I was watching you fight last night, and I know what I saw. That wasn't just ordinary wind magic. That was Dragon Slayer magic. Elfman's eyes widened at that. He had seen Natsu's Dragon Slayer magic before, and it was powerful. But even Natsu wasn't stronger than Mira. If Naruko was a Dragon Slayer and had managed to stop the beast on her own, then she must be far stronger than Natsu. Naruko stared at Lisanna in shock. How did she recognize Dragon Slayer magic? It was a lost magic, known by very few people. Mira smirked at Naruko's reaction. Don't look so surprised. We have a Dragon Slayer in our guild, maybe you've heard of him? Natsu the Salamander. Naruko hadn't. To be fair, she hadn't heard of any famous mages recently. But based on his title, she could make a good guess about who had trained him. Actually, I haven't. What element does he use? He's a fire dragon slayer. His dream is to become a great wizard so he can find his father. Do you know anything about a dragon named Igneel? Naruko did know of Igneel, the last of the once thriving fire dragons, known for his immense strength and pride. According to Tatsumaki, Igneel had grown arrogant as he matured, which led to some tension among the remaining dragons. Hopefully, his son hadn't inherited that trait. I know a little about Igneel, Naruko admitted, but nothing that would help Natsu find him. I'm sorry. Lisanna sighed, disappointed but not surprised. She hadn't expected Naruko to have useful information, but she had still hoped. Naruko didn't like seeing Lisanna upset. It just felt wrong. So, this Natsu, what's he like? Lisanna's expression brightened at the question. The best word to describe him is wild. He's unpredictable, no one ever knows what he'll do next, not even me. But that's what makes him fun. He keeps things exciting at the guild, and he always knows how to cheer people up. He's also incredibly loyal and protective, he would do anything for his guildmates. That's probably my favorite thing about him. As Lisanna continued talking about Natsu, Naruko could see just how much he meant to her. When she told the story of how Happy was born, Naruko couldn't help but laugh. It wasn't just the idea of a cat hatching from an egg, it was the image of a shy, awkward elfman that really got to her. The giant of a man simply looked away, slightly embarrassed, which only made Naruko laugh harder. So, Naruko, Mira spoke up, why don't you tell us a little about yourself? We don't really know anything about you except that you're a dragon slayer. Naruko hesitated. What do you want to know? It was a broad question, and there were definitely things she wasn't ready to share. Mira's eyes gleamed with curiosity. Oh, how about your father? His name was Tatsumaki, right? Shaking her head at the younger girl, Naruko gently corrected her. No, Lisanna-chan, Tatsumaki wasn't my father. He found me a couple of years ago when I was badly injured from a fight. He healed me and, once I recovered, he offered to train me. The rest is history. I only left his cave about 2 months ago. He taught me so much, he was an incredible mentor, even if he was a little strict. As Naruko spoke, her tone grew slightly somber towards the end. Though it was subtle, Mira noticed it. Something significant must have happened before Naruko left Tatsumaki's care. The way she spoke of him in the past tense suggested that he was no longer around. Losing a mentor like that must have been painful. Lisanna and Elfman didn't remember their parents very well, but Mira did. When they passed away, she had spent weeks crying in solitude. She had to stay strong and hold their family together. Things got better once Master Makarov took them in, but some wounds never fully heal. The heart holds on to loss in a way that time alone cannot mend. Even though Naruko insisted that she hadn't viewed Tatsumaki as a parent, it was clear that she cared for him deeply. Mira could tell that she was going through something similar to what she had experienced. Another thing that unsettled Mira was the timeline Naruko provided. Natsu had said that Igneel disappeared 5 years ago, but Naruko had only met Tatsumaki in the last 2. No one had seen a dragon since X777. How had Naruko even encountered one? And why had she been injured in the first place? Her answers seemed to raise more questions than they resolved. The latter question troubled Mira the most. Naruko was far too kind-hearted to let her suffer in silence. So, Naruko, you mentioned that you don't have anywhere to go. If that's the case, why not come back to Fairy Tale with us? There's always room for someone like you in the guild, and we could easily help you find a place to stay. Myra's suggestion brought a bright smile to Lisana's face. That's a great idea. The guild would love you. I bet you and Natsu would get along really well, too, especially since you both trained with dragons. Naruko hesitated. Joining a guild sounded fun, but she had other priorities. She needed to find a way back home. All the strength she had gained wouldn't matter if she couldn't figure out how to use it to travel across dimensions. I appreciate the offer, I really do, but I have something important to take care of first. I can't think about joining a guild until I handle it. Lisana looked a little disappointed, but Mira wasn't giving up so easily. And what exactly is so important? You said you don't have anywhere to go, so why not join the guild and handle whatever you need to do afterward? It's always nice to have a place to return to, and I know Lisana would love to have you around. Lisana quickly looked away, her face turning red. Why was her sister teasing her so much lately? What was Naruko going to think? Mira, nay, that's not what I meant. Don't listen to her, Naruko. Naruko glanced between the two sisters, confused. Mira wore a mischievous grin while Lisana glared at her. They had been acting like this all morning, and Naruko had no idea why. Look, I really appreciate the offer, but I've already made a promise to help a friend in Harjan. He has a wealthy acquaintance who needs protection, and he thought I could help. I'm already a couple of days late, so I really don't have time to head to Magnolia right now. Mira sighed, realizing she wouldn't convince her so easily. If Naruko had already agreed to take on a job, there wasn't much she could say. Well, how about this? Once you finish your mission, why don't you visit Fairy Tale? It's not hard to find once you get to Magnolia. Naruko could tell Mira was determined. She didn't see any way to make her stop insisting unless she agreed to something. Alright, how about this? Since I don't know how long the job will take, I'll do my best to visit when I have the chance. It's a bodyguard job, and it won't be over until the threat is dealt with. That could take a day or even a month. The takeover siblings seemed satisfied with that answer. They respected the fact that she had a prior commitment. So, who exactly are you supposed to be protecting? Elfman asked. There aren't too many incredibly wealthy families in Harjan. Naruko tilted her head slightly, noticing that Elfman seemed distracted. It was as if he was contributing to the conversation just to keep them from worrying about him. Let's see. I remember now, the Lobster family. Mira let out a low whistle. Wow, the Lobsters are one of the wealthiest families in Fiore, second only to the Hertfilia family. How did you land a job with them? Naruko shrugged. It was just luck, really. I helped a village deal with a problem involving some Vulcans and a lizard man. The mayor of the town mentioned that his friend needed a bodyguard, so I agreed. I had no idea they were that wealthy, just that they could afford to pay well. Looks like I'll be getting a decent paycheck, huh? Lisana laughed at Naruko's carefree attitude. She had landed a job protecting one of the richest families in the country, and she was just making jokes about it. She wasn't sure she would ever get used to that. Do you know any more details about the job? Being a bodyguard for an indefinite amount of time doesn't give you much to go on. Naruko shook her head. Not much. All I know is that the family's daughter broke up with a guy, and he didn't take it well. Apparently, he went so far as to hire a dark guild to go after her. I get being upset over a breakup, but hiring a dark guild? That's just extreme. Lisana shuddered at the thought. That's beyond unsettling. No wonder she broke up with him, he probably seemed too controlling. Mira nodded in agreement. After a moment of thought, a teasing smile crossed her lips. Yeah, that's definitely creepy. But maybe she had feelings for someone else, and he got jealous. Some people get really protective in relationships. Of course, what he did is completely wrong, but maybe there's more to the story. Lisana turned to glare at her sister. Before, her teasing had been light-hearted, but now she was pushing things too far. Before Lisana could respond, the train came to a sudden stop as they arrived at their destination. Oh, thank goodness, we finally stopped. Naruko practically shouted as she stood up. The entire ride had been unbearable. She had never felt sick a day in her life, but the moment the train started moving, her stomach betrayed her. She was never getting on one of these again. The three siblings exchanged amused glances. It was odd, Naruko's reaction was identical to Natsu's every time he got off a train. Maybe it really was a Dragon Slayer thing. Hey, Elfman, Lisana, why don't you two go buy our tickets for the train to Magnolia? Mira suggested. I'm still feeling a little sore from yesterday, and I want to keep these seats. They're really comfortable. Elfman gave a knowing nod. He could tell Mira had another reason for staying behind, but he wasn't in the mood to argue. Lisanna, however, looked ready to protest until Elfman gently placed a hand on her shoulder. No problem, Ne-chan. Let's go, Lisanna. Naruko watched as they walked away, then turned to Mira. You didn't really need them to buy the tickets, did you? Mira simply smiled. I thought it was obvious, I wanted to talk to you alone about a few things. Naruko crossed her arms. Well, you've got me alone. What did you want to talk about? Naruko watched as the girl in front of her fidgeted, nervously biting her lower lip. Was she actually feeling uneasy about something? It was surprising to see her act so much like, well, a regular girl. After witnessing her incredible strength the night before, it was difficult to picture the infamous demon of fairy tale displaying such vulnerability. It was, in a way, quite endearing. I wanted to say. I'm sorry, she admitted, her voice quieter than usual. About what happened at the inn during dinner. I didn't mean to be so rude to you, and I shouldn't have kicked you out the way I did. It was completely uncalled for. The entire time she spoke, she kept her gaze lowered, unable to meet Naruko's eyes. Whether it was from embarrassment, pride, or perhaps a mix of both, it was clear that apologizing wasn't something she was used to. Naruko gave her a small, understanding smile. Like I said before, I completely understand where you were coming from. Your family comes first, and I respect that. I don't hold it against you. Let's just move on. Mira Jane could hardly believe what she was hearing. Was Naruko really this forgiving? She had expected some level of resentment or at least a bit of frustration, but instead, Naruko dismissed the whole thing as if it had never happened. There was no point in arguing about it, though. If Naruko was willing to let it go, then so was she. I'm glad you're not upset, Mira Jane said with a small sigh of relief. But that's not the only reason I wanted to talk to you. I'm worried about you. Naruko raised an eyebrow. Worried? About me? Why? Her tone wasn't defensive or irritated, just genuinely curious. Mira Jane was relieved at that. The last thing she wanted was for Naruko to shut her out. Earlier, when you were talking about Tatsumaki, she began, carefully choosing her words, I noticed the way you spoke about him. Like he was gone. You used the past tense, and your expression. It made me think that he didn't just leave, nor did you. He's gone, isn't he? Naruko's gaze hardened as she met Mira Jane's eyes. She had done her best to keep her emotions in check, to mask the grief in her voice when speaking about her former mentor. She had been so sure that no one had noticed. Clearly, she had been wrong. It's not something I want to talk about, Mira-san, Naruko said quietly. Mira Jane could see it now, she had struck a nerve. Naruko was bottling up all of that sadness, trying to suppress it as if it would just disappear. She had done the same thing when she lost her parents. And she knew from experience that suppressing pain never worked. The longer one tried, the worse it would be when everything came crashing down. You need to talk about it, Mira Jane said gently. It's not healthy to keep it all inside. It's also not healthy to dwell on the past, Naruko countered, her voice steady but distant. Some things are better left as they are, Mira-san. She wasn't ready. Mira Jane could tell. Naruko hadn't come to terms with it yet, and she wasn't about to force her. Still, she needed to say this. There's a difference between dwelling on the past and facing something that's affecting you, she said. When my parents passed away, I buried my sadness deep inside. I tried to ignore it for years. But one day, when I attempted a new takeover, all that bottled up emotion overwhelmed me. I lost control. If Master Makarov hadn't been there, I could have destroyed an entire town. She placed a hand on Naruko's shoulder. I don't want that to happen to you. I know how strong you are, but even the strongest people can break if they don't allow themselves to heal. And no matter what you think, Lisanna cares about you. More than you probably realize. If something happened to you because of this, it would hurt her deeply. Naruko sat in silence, her head lowered, absorbing every word. It all made sense. Tatsumaki had always told her that death was just another part of life, that the greatest disservice one could do to the departed was to stop living because of their loss. She knew what she should do. But knowing and doing were two very different things. No matter what her mind told her, her heart wasn't ready to move forward. Mira Jane gently pulled her into a one-armed hug. I'm not saying you have to deal with it right now, she reassured her. Just promise me you won't ignore it forever. You don't have to do it for yourself. Do it for Lisanna, if nothing else. Naruko didn't resist the hug, though she didn't return it either. She simply sat there, thinking. After a long moment, she finally exhaled and pulled away. You're right. I do need to deal with this, she admitted. But not now. I have a job to do, and I can't afford distractions. There's an assassin out there, and I need to stay focused. But, could you not mention this to Lisanna or Elfman? I don't want them worrying about me. If you keep this between us, I promise I'll face it when I'm ready. Deal? Mira Jane smiled warmly. Deal. Just then, a cheerful voice called out, Mira-ne. Naruko-chan. We're back. Both of them turned to see Lisanna waving enthusiastically as she and Elfman approached. It had taken them quite a while to get the tickets, but Mira Jane wasn't complaining. So, when does the next train to Magnolia leave? She asked. Elfman glanced at the ticket in his hand. In about an hour. We have some time. Naruko stood up, brushing herself off. Thanks for everything, but I need to head out now. I can't stay here any longer. I'll come to Magnolia as soon as I can, all right? Before she could leave, Lisanna quickly reached out, grabbing her arm. Wait. Do you even know where you're going? We could show you the way to the lobster's place. We've been there before. Mira Jane, watching the interaction, suddenly got an idea. That's a great idea. Elfman, why don't you take Naruko there? I just remembered something I need to take care of in town, and I could use Lisanna's help. Before Lisanna could protest, Mira Jane grabbed her hand and started leading her toward the market district. Naruko blinked. That was unexpected. She glanced at Elfman. Looks like it's just the two of us, big guy. Ready to show me the way? Elfman gave a silent nod and started walking in the opposite direction of his sisters. The atmosphere around him seemed heavy, as if he were lost in thought. The silence didn't sit well with Naruko. If she was left to her own thoughts, she'd start thinking about Tatsumaki again, and that wasn't what she needed right now. You should really stop, Elfman, she said suddenly. Elfman looked at her, confused. Stop what? You had been struggling all day to piece together what happened last night after your takeover failed. Some memories are best left untouched, trust me on that. As Naruko looked into Elfman's eyes, she could see that he was completely serious. Even so, Elfman couldn't accept it. He knew he had done something terrible, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't remember. Honestly, I don't care what you think right now, I need to know what happened. If I truly have the strength to protect those I care about, then I can handle the truth. Naruko sighed at Elfman's determined stance. She knew she probably shouldn't tell him, but if he was this insistent, maybe he really could handle it. Are you sure you want to know? She asked. Fine. After you lost control, you nearly hurt Lisanna. I stepped in and stopped you. That's the truth. Happy now? Elfman's eyes widened in shock. He grabbed Naruko by her collar and lifted her slightly off the ground. That's not possible. I would never hurt Lisanna. If you truly believe in honesty, then tell me the truth. Naruko remained calm, looking directly into Elfman's eyes with an unwavering gaze. I have no reason to lie to you. I barely made it in time to block the attack meant for Lisanna. If I hadn't, it could have been really bad. I would never make something like this up. Elfman stared into Naruko's eyes, searching for any sign of dishonesty. But there was none. If what she said was true, that meant he really had lost control. That he had nearly hurt his own sister. The realization hit him like a wave. Letting go of Naruko, he dropped to his knees, unable to meet her gaze. Naruko looked down at him with understanding. She had been in a similar situation before, when she lost control and hurt someone she cared about. Elfman, this wasn't your fault. You did everything you could to protect your family. But it wasn't enough, Elfman whispered, his voice trembling. I was too weak to stop it. Then become stronger, Naruko said firmly. I noticed that you can't use a full-body takeover without losing control. Train until you can. Fight to master that power instead of letting it control you. Whether you like it or not, it's part of you now. If you truly want to protect those you love, then you need to gain control over it. Elfman raised his head to see Naruko offering her hand with a sincere smile. Wiping his tears, he took it and stood up. You're right. I'll train harder than ever, and I'll master this power. Thank you, Naruko. Lisanna was not happy. Why did I have to come with you to pick up new missions for the guild? Elfman could have done that. I wanted to spend more time with Naruko before we had to leave. Mira Jane didn't even glance at her younger sister as they walked through town. That's exactly why I asked Elfman to do it. Lisanna, we need to talk. I'm concerned about how you've been acting around Naruko. Lisanna gave her a puzzled look. What do you mean? She saved us, how am I supposed to act? Should I ignore her? Mira Jane sighed. This was going to be more difficult than she thought. You've been paying an awful lot of attention to her. I know she helped us last night, and I'm incredibly grateful, but don't you think you're being a little too affectionate? Lisanna blinked, looking at her sister like she had grown a second head. I have no idea what you're talking about. She got really hurt protecting us. The least I could do was make sure she was okay. What's wrong with that? Nothing, Mira admitted, but you might be sending the wrong message. Even if you don't realize it, Naruko might. She could think you're interested in her in a different way. And Lisanna, I don't care who you like, that's your decision, but you and Natsu have always had something special. I'd hate to see that get ruined because of a misunderstanding. Lisanna didn't respond right away. Was she really acting like that? Naruko hadn't seemed uncomfortable with her attention. But did she like Naruko in that way? She was strong, kind, and selfless. She had risked her life just because she thought it was the right thing to do. And she was intelligent, too. The more Lisanna thought about it, the more confused she felt. She would have a lot to consider before returning to Magnolia. Naruko and Elfman approached an enormous gate, set apart from most of the town. Beyond it, a massive mansion sat at the end of a long pathway. This is the place, huh? Naruko asked. Elfman nodded as he took in the sight. This is the Lobster Mansion. And from what I've heard, this isn't even their biggest one. They own a much larger estate on their main plantation. Naruko let out a low whistle. They must be doing well for themselves. Yeah, Elfman agreed. Well, I guess this is where we part ways. Thanks for letting me tag along, I wouldn't have found this place without you. Don't mention it. Just don't take too long to visit Magnolia again, Elfman said with a grin. My sisters have taken a liking to you, even if Mira won't admit it. Next time we meet, I'll be stronger, I promise. Naruko smiled as she watched him leave. The Strauss siblings were definitely unique, but she liked them. Hopefully, they would meet again soon. Approaching the gate, Naruko spotted a communication relay. Pressing the button, she spoke, "Hello? Could someone open the gate? I'm here regarding a mission request." A few seconds later, a screen lit up, showing a guard's face. The master of this house did not request any mission. Please leave the premises. Naruko frowned. That's not what I was told. Bacchus's father informed me that his friend here needed assistance with an assassin. He personally asked me to come, so open the gate. The guard's image disappeared momentarily before returning. Apologies. We assumed you had ignored the request due to the delay. The master will meet you at the entrance. As the gates opened, Naruko felt a little nervous. The lobsters probably weren't happy about how long it had taken her to arrive. She really had meant to get here sooner, but one thing led to another and, well, things happened. Walking up to the grand doors, she watched as they opened on their own. Inside stood a stern-looking man, dressed in a finely tailored brown business suit. His light brown hair was tinged with gray, and a thick mustache sat atop his face, which was set in a permanent frown. I see you finally decided to grace us with your presence, he said, his tone laced with irritation. Naruko winced at the obvious frustration in his voice. Sorry about that. You see. I have no interest in excuses, he interrupted. You've wasted enough time already. Follow me. We have much to discuss. Naruko silently followed, noting how high-strung this man was. But then again, if an assassin was after his family, he had a right to be on edge. The man led her to a spacious living room, where two women sat on an elegant couch. One, clearly his wife, wore an expensive cream-colored gown. Her brown hair cascaded halfway down her back, and she wore a sad expression. The other woman, their daughter, looked to be in her early 20s. She had shoulder-length brown hair and wore a royal blue gown. The father gestured toward them. This is my wife, Lisa, and my daughter, Michelle. Naruko took a seat across from them. It's a pleasure to meet you. I apologize for the delay. Some things came up along the way. The father narrowed his eyes. I told you before, I don't care for excuses. While you were off dealing with things, there have already been 3 attempts on my daughter's life. Naruko's eyes widened. This was more serious than she had realized. I understand, she said. That's why I'm here. Let's stop this assassin, before it's too late. The head of the family observed Naruko with a stern expression. You don't seem to grasp the reality of this world, do you? Capturing this assassin won't serve any real purpose. That would only signal to the rest of their guild that there are no severe consequences for their actions. The attacks will persist, and with each attempt, they edge closer to success. If you make it clear that failure comes at a great cost, they will think twice before risking their lives for a mission they are not obligated to complete. I want that assassin eliminated, do you understand me? Naruko clenched her fists at his words. His outlook on the world was far too harsh for her liking. Did he truly believe that the only way to resolve a conflict was through force? The only reason I'm allowing you to take on this mission is because a close friend of mine vouched for your abilities, the man continued. He spoke of your strength but failed to mention whether you had the resolve to see things through. Tell me now, are you capable of completing this mission? Naruko shut her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath to steady herself. This man was beyond frustrating. But she had made a promise to help, and she never went back on her word. Rising to her feet, she made her way to the door. Just as she reached the threshold, she turned her head slightly to glance back at him. I'll see this mission through. Completely. After leaving the main estate, Naruko was given a tour of the grounds by the head of the lobster family's personal security force. The compound was massive, surrounded by towering security walls. However, those barriers meant little, any skilled mage could bypass them with ease. The sheer size of the area quickly made Naruko realize that guarding the entire perimeter was nearly impossible. Even with her shadow clones, she couldn't maintain full surveillance while reserving enough energy for an actual fight. The same issue applied to the mansion itself, too many rooms, too many entry points. Attempting to cover every possible entrance was impractical, especially without knowing what kind of magic the assassin possessed. Which led to her current situation, sitting in Michelle's room, watching as the young woman brushed her hair. How many times do you have to brush it before bed? Naruko asked, leaning back in her seat. It's just going to get messy again by morning. Michelle paused her humming and turned toward Naruko with a small, amused smirk. It takes as long as it takes. I wouldn't expect someone of your lifestyle to understand the importance of maintaining appearances. Naruko huffed. Well, excuse me for traveling on foot across the country just to get here. Let's see how put together you'd look after a month without all your fancy accessories. Michelle visibly shuddered at the mere thought. I would never allow myself to be in such a situation, she said dramatically. How do you even tolerate something like that? Naruko chuckled at her reaction. When your life is on the line, you stop worrying about the little things. I like being clean as much as anyone, but on missions, survival takes priority. Michelle continued brushing her hair, considering Naruko's words. When Bacchus had visited, he spoke endlessly about his strength and achievements, always trying to impress her. She had assumed that Naruko, the highly recommended mage her father trusted, would be similar. But Naruko was entirely different. Bacchus had confidence bordering on arrogance, yet he had the power to back it up. Naruko, on the other hand, didn't boast. In fact, all they really knew about her abilities was that she used something called dragon-slaying magic. Their family wasn't deeply involved in the magical world, but the name itself sounded impressive. More importantly, Naruko took her job seriously. Unlike Bacchus, who had spent most of his time charming her, Naruko had asked for a full tour of the estate, carefully analyzing every possible weak point. Though, in the end, she still ended up staying close, just like Bacchus had, albeit for entirely different reasons. Once Michelle finished brushing her hair, she turned toward Naruko. Well? Are you going to step out while I change, or do you plan on staring at me all night? Naruko rolled her eyes. Yeah, I'm going. Just let me know when you're done. Michelle watched her leave with mild amusement. When she had made the same remark to Bacchus, he insisted on staying in the room, claiming it was necessary for her protection. She hadn't minded at the time, but Naruko was clearly different. Once she had changed and climbed into bed, she called out, "You can come in now, Uzumaki-sama." Naruko re-entered the room with an annoyed expression. She had told Michelle not to call her that, it felt strange. But Michelle continued using the title just to irritate her. And unfortunately, it worked. Taking her spot in the corner, Naruko settled in for the night. She began channeling her magic into the air, creating an invisible sensory web. Tatsumaki had taught her this technique. It worked similarly to a spider's web. Anything that disturbed the magical field would alert her immediately. The assassin had remained undetected up until now, leaving no trace of their presence. It was sheer luck that Michelle had not been harmed yet. Naruko wouldn't take any chances. If they stepped into her web, she would know. Michelle observed Naruko as she sat motionless in the corner. Though it appeared as though she were resting, there was an unmistakable shift in the atmosphere, a subtle warmth that filled the room, making her feel oddly secure. Uzumaki-sama, Michelle spoke again, her tone playful. Why don't you sit with me? I'm not sleepy yet, and I'm sure you have plenty of thrilling stories to tell. Naruko gave her a flat look. It wasn't the request itself that bothered her, It was the way Michelle worded it. Seriously, who asks like that? Still, with a sigh, Naruko moved over to the bedside. Alright, what do you want to hear? Michelle pouted. How should I know? You're the one who's been on all these life and death missions. Surely you have something exciting to share. Naruko thought for a moment. Michelle wasn't a mage, nor did she have knowledge of other worlds. She decided to share a story from her past, one that didn't need much alteration. She recounted her first major mission, the one in the Land of Waves. She told Michelle about the ambush by the Demon Brothers, the vow she made, and her first battle against Zabuza. She spoke of the island village's struggles and her conversation with Haku. She described the final confrontation, how she and her allies fought against overwhelming odds. She spared the darker details but made it clear how challenging it had been. By the time she finished, Michelle's eyes glistened with unshed tears. That sounds like something from a tragic novel. And that was your first mission? Naruko nodded. We thought it was just a simple escort job, fending off bandits, not battling powerful dark mages. It could have gone a lot worse, but I'm grateful we all made it through. Michelle absent-mindedly traced a pattern on Naruko's arm. At some point during the story, she had nestled closer, but Naruko hadn't minded. Michelle seemed more comfortable around her now, more at ease. So, Michelle mused, you mentioned being part of a team and something called Konoha. But I thought you told my father you weren't in a guild? Naruko hesitated for a moment before replying. I'm not. Konoha wasn't a guild, it was a village. I left over 2 years ago. Someday, I hope to return. But for now, I'm an independent mage. Michelle tilted her head in curiosity but didn't press further. She simply nodded, closing her eyes. Within moments, her breathing evened out as sleep took over. Naruko remained awake, keeping her senses sharp. Whatever came next, she would be ready. Michelle was curious about why Naruko had left her old guild, but she chose not to press the issue. Even she could tell there were some topics Naruko preferred not to discuss. You know, you were right. When you said some of your missions were life and death, I thought it was just bravado to impress me. But after hearing your story, I can tell it was real. The details were too vivid to be fabricated. I never realized being a mage could be so dangerous. Naruko considered the statement. Being a mage was certainly perilous, but compared to the life of a shinobi, it felt different. For a shinobi, the line between life and death was something one had to accept daily. In this world, danger existed, but it didn't seem to be a constant presence in the minds of its people. The world can be harsh, Michelle-sama. You're fortunate to have the protection of your family and the privileges that come with it. Beyond that, though, there are many who face real hardships every day. Even these assassination attempts don't seem to shake you too much. I can tell you're afraid, but you continue your daily routines as if nothing has changed. Most people with an assassin after them would be much more cautious. I understand that. I'm not as sheltered as you might think. I've snuck out before and seen glimpses of what life is like beyond these walls. But if I let fear consume me, I'd stop living. That's not the kind of life I want. You have to embrace every moment. Naruko could understand that. Her father had done everything he could to protect her, and she had learned that worrying about what couldn't be controlled was pointless. I suppose you're right. Sometimes, you just have to live in the moment, she admitted. With all the challenges you face in your work, how do you relax after a mission? It was an innocent question, but the way Michelle looked at her made Naruko momentarily flustered. I usually just train. I don't get much free time, and when I do, I use it to improve myself for the next mission. There really isn't much room for anything else. Michelle shifted closer, her hand resting gently on Naruko's chest. That doesn't sound like a very enjoyable life. Don't you ever take a moment to unwind and enjoy the simple things? Naruko's thoughts scattered as Michelle slowly leaned in, closing the distance between them. Just as she was about to react, Naruko's instincts flared to life. In an instant, she grabbed Michelle and leapt away from the bed. A split second later, a powerful blade of wind slashed through the space they had just occupied, slicing the bed clean in half. Naruko landed softly, setting Michelle down safely before scanning the room for their unseen assailant. Something felt off. There was no trace of magical energy, no telltale sense of hostility, just the eerie silence of the night. TCH, I was hoping to finish this quickly while you were distracted. Looks like you've got better reflexes than I expected, kid. A tall figure dropped from the rafters above. He wore a long traveler's cloak that concealed most of his form, but his wild silver hair and piercing gaze were unmistakable. Two vertical lines marked his face just below his eyes, intersected by smaller horizontal scars. In his grip, he held a massive scythe, humming with wind magic. "I assume you're the assassin," Naruko said, her stance unwavering. "I'm surprised. From what I've heard, you prefer to operate from the shadows rather than making a direct confrontation." The man smirked, his gaze sweeping over her before responding. "Stealth had its uses, but I got tired of my previous attempts failing. Every time I got close, something got in the way. This time, I'm done playing games. If I have to bring down this entire estate to complete the mission, so be it." Naruko remained calm. If the assassin had lost his patience and was now willing to face her head-on, that gave her the advantage. Why even bother continuing with this mission? Your client has already been arrested. You got paid, didn't you? Why not just walk away? The man laughed. "What kind of professional do you take me for? A job is a job. If I take on an assignment, I see it through, no matter what. Otherwise, what good am I to the next client?" Naruko had expected that kind of response, but it had been worth asking. "I see. But there's one thing I don't understand, how did you get in without me sensing you? That shouldn't have been possible. You aren't the only one who knows how to manipulate wind magic, kid. I could feel your little detection barrier in the air and gradually filtered it out with my own abilities. It took longer than expected, but it worked. Plus, this cloak helps, it completely masks a mage's magical presence from the outside world. Useful for avoiding censors like you." There was no point in continuing the conversation. Naruko moved. With blinding speed, she lunged at the assassin, grabbing hold of him and hurling him out through Michelle's large window. The man twisted midair, landing effortlessly before rising to hover above the ground. "Quick, aren't you?" he mused. "Too bad speed alone won't be enough. Do you even know who I am? I'm Irrigor of Eisenwald. People call me the Death God. And I'll make sure you remember that name before the night is over." Naruko wasn't interested in his titles. Names meant nothing, actions did. Without hesitation, she rushed him again. Irrigor's scythe pulsed with wind magic as he unleashed a barrage of slicing gusts. They were powerful but not particularly fast, designed for destruction rather than precision. Naruko weaved between them with ease, closing the distance between them in seconds. Drawing a kunai and channeling wind chakra into it, she met his scythe head-on, blocking his downward strike with a shower of sparks. "Hey, not bad, kid," Irrigor said, straining against her strength. "What's with that look? You seem pretty upset. Did I take someone important from you?" "Nothing personal, it's just business." Naruko's grip on her weapon tightened. She had done her research while preparing to protect Michelle. She knew exactly who Irrigor was and what he stood for. After Eisenwald had been disbanded for taking illegal jobs, he had continued his work as an assassin, not just for money, but because he enjoyed the act itself. That was what disgusted her most. "People like you," she muttered, eyes narrowing. "What was that?" Irrigor sneered. "Speak up, kid. Can't hear you over the wind that's about to. You don't deserve that power." With a surge of strength, Naruko knocked his weapon aside and drove her fist into his stomach. As he staggered back, she followed up with a swift elbow to his chin before spinning into a kick that sent him skidding across the ground. Irrigor wiped a trace of blood from his lip, irritation flickering in his eyes. Naruko, however, wasn't done. She had read everything about him, the way he discarded allies the moment they became inconvenient, the way he treated life as a game. He had no principles, no honor. Irrigor clenched his jaw. "You're going to regret that, kid." He extended his hand, a massive purple magic circle forming in front of him. The air crackled with energy. "You ready for this?" he challenged. "Stormbringer." Naruko sensed a sudden change in the air as the wind around her intensified. Reacting quickly, she leapt to the side and anchored herself to the ground using her chakra just as a powerful tornado formed where she had been standing moments ago. Irrigor noticed that Naruko was somehow resisting the pull of his storm and, determined to overpower her, increased the tornado's strength. The swirling winds tore trees from the earth as the storm grew more intense. Despite her strong grip, Naruko felt the strain as the force threatened to pull her in. Unlike the last time she had faced a similar challenge, Naruko made a swift decision. Instead of resisting, she propelled herself toward the tornado's edge. Channeling her own wind magic as a barrier, she skillfully rode along the storm's current, using its immense power to launch herself straight at Irrigor with incredible speed. Irrigor's eyes widened in disbelief. Who in their right mind would willingly ride a tornado? Yet, in the blink of an eye, Naruko was upon him, her momentum boosted by the storm's force. She struck with precision, driving her fist into Iriger's chest. He felt the impact reverberate through his body as the force cracked at least 2 of his ribs. The sheer power of the blow sent him hurtling backward, skidding across the ground. His control over the tornado faltered, and as a result, the storm gradually lost its energy and dissipated. Naruko fixed him with a steady gaze. Do you know why you've lost? It's because you put your own desires above everything else. You're willing to abandon your allies just to make things easier for yourself. You chase power and wealth without considering the consequences of your actions. But most of all, you don't care about the suffering you cause. Iriger struggled to his feet, his breathing labored from the damage he had taken. A trickle of blood ran from his lips, a sign of his internal injuries. You think you understand? You're no different from me, he spat. I can see it in your eyes, the way you move, the way you fight. You've taken lives before. You pretend it's for justice, but at the end of the day, killing is killing. You tell yourself it's necessary, that it's justified, but it doesn't change the reality of what you are. With a furious glare, he gathered his energy. Storm Mail. A fierce wind enveloped his body like armor, forming countless razor-sharp blades. Without hesitation, he charged at Naruko with deadly intent. This is the end for you. Naruko stood her ground, watching calmly as he rushed toward her. As his fist came flying at her, she effortlessly caught it in her hand. The cutting winds of his storm mail barely affected her, just as she had anticipated. With a deep breath, she began absorbing the wind magic straight from his body, drawing it into herself. Iriger's mind reeled. Did she just eat my magic? Naruko exhaled slowly. You're right about one thing, taking a life is never something to be taken lightly. But unlike you, I don't take pleasure in it. Iriger clenched his teeth in frustration. You think that makes you better than me? He shouted. Don't fool yourself. You carry the weight of every life you've taken. You fight for those in power, follow orders without question, and in the end, they'll turn their backs on you just like they did to me. Someday, you'll be cast aside just like I was. Naruko remained silent for a moment, her expression unreadable. She could see the bitterness in his eyes, the anger that consumed him. There was nothing she could say to change his mind. He was too lost in his own resentment. Maybe, she said finally. Maybe not. But that's not something you'll get to see. Gathering her wind magic, she delivered a precise, controlled strike to his chest, knocking him unconscious instantly. As Iriger collapsed, the battle was over. Standing over him, Naruko reflected on his words. As a shinobi, she had been taught that taking lives was sometimes necessary to complete a mission. It was a reality she had always accepted. But did necessity truly justify such actions? Was it really so different from what Iriger had claimed? She shook her head, pushing the thoughts aside for now. There would be time to find her own answers. For now, the fight was over. My beloved YouTube community. That's a wrap for now. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay tuned for more exciting videos. Your support means the world. Much appreciation. 6 Path Weeb.